It's fucking working.
I'm gonna start taking the mic off stand and like doing like a fucking Dino, like Frank Sinatra type thing.
Just like walk around.
Yeah, just do crowd work.
Right.
Where you let it come from?
I'm going to be like in the corner like Sammy Davis Jr. with my like kind of winking eye, right? And
Just kind of making comments in the background.
Yeah. Just that's it. Welcome back, Screamers, to another episode where we examine all the crazy things we do in the name of love.
Jesus Christ, that's what we're doing. Yeah.
That's what we're going with, which is, I think, apt for the films we're talking about today, which is the new film Bottoms, directed by Emma Seligman, starring Rachel Sennott and Ayo Edeberi, and we have more Cassavetes. The, playful romantic romp that is Minnie and Moskowitz, and the loving study of a marriage, which is the Cassavetes theme, right? A woman under the influence. But these two films have four performances that are frankly fucking amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's...
also, if you've noticed my voice, this weather fucks with my sinuses and stuff. So
we get Brock after dark here.
It's not that... Boy, you should have known me back when. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Brock's in his smoking jacket and and silk pajamas.
And 2 packs of Pall Malls a day, I'll tell you.
I mean, look, neither one of these, and I love the idea that Cassavetes is sitting back in a crowd, just kind of like deliciously eating up people, like not knowing how to react to any of these films. Like, especially because like he's doing shit at this time that no one is doing, right? I mean, like prior to Minnie and Moskowitz. I mean, Moskowitz, you're still talking. It's not Minnie Moskowitz, by the way. I'm trying to say it that way.
It's a new character.
I mean, like he's ushering in the American New Wave, and then kind of riding the crest of what he's, of the wave that he has essentially put into motion, right? I mean, and so now we're in a very brief period of time where Hollywood is kind of catching up with this idea of independent cinema, and like they're taking a huge hit because for whatever reason, and then so they're starting to like refocus and start going back to smaller $1 million films. There's no money for big budget stars, so you're seeing things like like Silent Running. You're seeing things I forget all the titles, but
but this is like in part of New Hollywood,
right. And still Cassavetes is even in this system is still doing it differently, right? I mean,
even among the Michael Ciminos of the world, right?
Right. And it's obvious that people it takes years for I think he was appreciated in his time, but I do think that in a studio system that didn't really know what to do with him, that didn't really know how to distribute his films, market his films, like this is a guy who is DIY on everything. And this is the reason that you see Gena Rowlands in 11 of his films, and Falk and Cassell and Gazzara, and his mom and his dad and her and Gena's brother
Rowland's
and like
mom.
his kids and like all these people that stay in this stable of his is because he mortgages his house for every fucking film that he does.
Yeah, and Falk chips in money.
Right. And then, and the studio doesn't agree with the posters that he's doing. So he puts together his own posters and prints his own posters and starts putting them up. And then he four-walls his theaters, his distribution and rents out theaters for himself to get word of mouth. It's crazy that Hollywood couldn't find really a way to embrace him and to figure out how to really, because again, he does this, and we get to A Woman Under the Influence, which is it's nominated for Best Director, Best Actress, should have been nominated. I mean, this is a year of Godfather 2, so Godfather 2 is probably going to win everything, of course. And you've got an up-and-comer in Scorsese, and Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, who was a huge protege of Cassavetes. It's I don't know. Now I lose my train of thought about it. I was like, because I started thinking along those lines. But I mean, it's so he. Oh well, I guess I was going to say he does this for $1 million, right? And once 1.2 does it for $1 million, He gets 500 something from Falk because Falk's flush from, and there's a really funny line from Cassell. It's like Falk would sit on a dime until it melted because he was so cheap. But Falk's so invested, he turns down Day of the Dolphin to be in Women Under the Influence. Puts up $500,000 as his own money. All these people do all of this because they know, they'll get paid on the back end if it all takes care of itself, right? And he ends up making $10 million on his own distribution of this film. And so that's $9 million in his pocket had it have been, done by a studio that had controlled the number of, what's crazy to me too is like, I wonder if that $1 million included the 300 prints that he had to get made to ship these around the country. And and a lot of times, doing the distribution yourself, you're shipping these prints out. You're waiting on theaters to pay you. So like what he did with The Woman is made sure that they had an upfront fee. So basically it was an upfront fee, a guaranteed set of money, and then he would get part of the grosses after the fact, but he needed an upfront fee so before he could do any of this stuff. So, and I guess these revival houses and art house films, these smaller theaters, notoriously hard to get money from once it was all said and done. It's funny to me that that's actually how it works. It's like, like, hey, we'll let you show this, and then, but we expect you to play nice and send us the money that we are owed after the movie's done.
Sound cool? Yeah,
right.
Yeah. You'll do that.
We'll do it. Yeah, it's okay. Good. 300 screens here in the U.S. or whatever it is. Not at least not at this point. It's more than that, but
it's weird how that should have happened right now.
Yeah, and how you would possibly keep track of it all as an independent filmmaker.
This is why so many sort of like crooks get into the film business, right?
Yeah.
I guess. What are you going to do?
And if you can, like this, like we don't see this anymore, right? A Woman Under the Influence played for 18 months in theaters. That's bonkers, right? And it's playing in New York and Los Angeles heavily. And then, the Cassavetes is looking through newspapers, looking for theaters that play movies that he likes so he can call them up and say, hey, I've got this new movie. You want to show it? But this idea that, and of course, there is no home video market, right? There's no no one's even really waiting for this to come on Movie of the Week at this point. Maybe
people in their backyard are setting up their own like reel-to-reel projectors and like white sheet in the back.
Right. Yeah. So like in this was what 74 at this point. Yeah. So it's nuts that you were able to keep track of the books and like to have 300 theaters or like however many prints, because I'm sure prints get destroyed, but however many theaters you had this going in simultaneously to try to keep track of all that. Like for a guy like Cassavetes, who was so hands-on with everything, it still had to drive him crazy that he couldn't really ever get embraced by these guys. And it was always a matter of like, I'm going to go do some acting for them, and then this is going to help me pay for the things that I love to do. But he really like worked behind the films. It'd be one thing just to make it, and then to say, hey, I'm done with that, and let's let the chips fall where they may. But no, man, he's stumped for it.
Everything. Right? Yeah. Do you really think I see him more as like kind of working within the system to subvert the system? Like I'll go do Rosemary's Baby. I'll go do Dirty Dozen. But I'm not. But I'm going to use you for that to go do this other thing that you won't let me do. So fuck you. I'll go play on my own. Right. Where he does. I don't know. I really wonder if he ever like really cared about being embraced by the studios or the big. Or if he was just like, look, we're making our stuff, and that's. Yeah, whatever.
I think he understood where he could get away with things and where he couldn't. Like obviously, Husband starts running up the bill, and he starts to get some of it taken back from him. He gets the one movie completely taken away from him. So like I would imagine these are lessons learned.
Child is waiting.
A child, that's right. Yeah, a child is waiting.
Still,
it's just sitting there waiting for Judy Garland to come back. Fuck you all.
There's no place like home. Oh, God,
but yeah, I think at this point he probably has. But again, how many times can you do this?
Yeah.
If you look at someone like Elaine May, who then gets chewed up by the system, and doesn't. Because you would imagine, one at this point they're running in the same circles, and I think she did a table read for A Woman Under the Influence, or was there when they were doing like the folk read or whatever. But I think at this point, like you would want them to just to say, hey, it would be nice.
Yeah, right,
right. Just to take over, pay me $3 million. I made this for $1 million. Pay me $3 million so I can pay my people.
Yeah.
And distribute it and pay me a percentage of after the fact.
But he knows they're never going to let him do what he wants. I mean, that's the other thing too.
Right.
Even if it's just like, just let me do this and you do this, they're going to be like, mm-mm. They're always going to have input and always. I mean, that's how these big, powerful institutions work, right? We'll leave you alone for a minute.
Right. It really is baffling, and we come through waves because like this same thing starts to happen when the Sundance, when that kind of underground
indie
movement,
sort of,
right? You start to hit with Slackers, you start to hit Spike Lee, and she's got to have
Sex, Lies, and Videotape,
right? So all these small movies that are made that can then make their money back and become indie darlings, and then we see studios do the same thing. They start throwing. Anything that's under a $5 million film gets almost automatically greenlit. So you end up with a bunch of like weird Merchant Ivory type films, and then a bunch of Tarantino knockoffs that can all be made for basically nothing, right?
Right.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I do think that he enjoyed the freedom, and obviously, knowing that his stable of people were always around him and always willing to kind of step in and work. But again, I think at a certain point, like especially as you watch someone like your protege, Scorsese, like just take off. I mean, and basically, he tells Scorsese gets kind of excruciated for making Boxcar Bertha, and everyone's kind of like making fun of him for it. And he's about to sign up with Corman again to do another genre kind of like low budget, and Cassavetes is like, this is you spent a year making a piece of shit. Now go make what you want. Right?
Do something else. Right.
Right. This is how it works. Right.
Yeah. So I want to throw something out at you. The critic scholar Ray Carney, who's at Boston University, who wrote a bunch on Cassavetes, and I think wrote Cassavetes on Cassavetes with John Cassavetes.
That's a lot.
He suggests that Minnie and Moskowitz, A Woman Under the Influence, and Faces make a kind of spiritual trilogy about marriage, which I think is a really interesting way to frame those three movies. Right. We've talked about Faces. We're going to talk about these other two, but I think that is a really interesting way, especially because the order is wrong. Right. But you can see how Minnie and Moskowitz would be the beginning. Right. And then we get A Woman Under the Influence as kind of the middle piece, and then Faces is this disillusioned like finale.
Yeah, but I do think that as we're going to get into, I do think that Minnie and Moskowitz and A Woman Under the Influence do focus more on their female characters than Faces does.
Yeah.
I mean, Faces is a split time, but I do think I do think the male narrative drives Faces more than it does in these other movies.
Yeah.
And I think by the time that we get to A Woman Under the Influence, I mean, everything that's come before it, this is his fucking masterpiece.
Oh yeah.
And not only that, but it's Gina's masterpiece as well.
Yes.
This is. And did you know there was the original 4-hour cut of this film? Because if Cassavetes is going to you and saying, I need to cut this back, it's too hard on the audience, I can't imagine what that 4-hour.
Yeah.
But people who saw it said it was fucking brilliant. That it was just amazing.
Well, I mean, I tend to think most of this stuff is brilliant and amazing anyway, so I can't imagine that kind of unfiltered then look at this and how hard, and again, we'll dig into this more.
I just wonder where, I just wonder where it was, because I mean, this was clearly written for Gina.
Yeah.
This was something, it started out where they wanted to do, I guess Gina was looking for something to do, and they were talking about doing a play. And he had written this play. And Gina was like,
I'll kill myself. I'll die.
I can't do this more than 2 nights in a row. What are you fucking crazy?
And he's like, all right, I'll make a movie.
Right. But his first pitch to her was, well, I've got 2 other plays that will fall. And she's like, I don't think you're getting the point. The point is not more of this. It's like, this is too much already. And so he took the 3 plays and made it into A Woman Under the Influence. Yeah, I can't. And she, I mean, good on her to like know. I mean, one, like trying to pull off this sort of performance night after night after night. There's no like. I would imagine that the shoot that it existed as in and of itself was hard enough to do. Especially having to film a lot. Because at the end, you know, we watch a movie and you think, okay, well, you watch that scene and that was the scene, and it was only the dinner scene where they're eating spaghetti in the first, and you know, in the basically
breakfast.
the first spaghetti for breakfast at 7 a.m. Took a week to film. They said by the end of that film, by the end of this, they'd run out of sauce, and like the spaghetti was just covered in ketchup. And they were like, we couldn't eat spaghetti for months after that.
No. In fact, look, okay, enough. We need to. We need
to actually talk about these movies rather than talking about the movies.
Yeah. We need to talk about Bottoms before we jump into Cassavetes, because I think we do want to talk about this because it's a new film. It's brilliant. It fucking rules. Okay, so
Could the ugly, untalented gays please report to the principal's office?
Guess that's you guys.
Tonight is our night. We're getting the cooch. I'm gonna talk to Brittany. You can say hi to Isabel.
What would I say? Hey, girl, how's your boyfriend? How's his penis?
Mirror, mirror on the wall.
I'm gonna expel you both for committing a crime against Jeff.
Get out of the car.
You can't tell me what to do!
Get out of the freaking car!
We were just practicing for a self-defense club.
So it's like a fight club?
Yes.
Just stay in your lane until you're munching beaver at Wesleyan.
Yes, sir.
What's your plan here?
Jeff is psychotic.
And they're picking on the weak and defenseless.
So we teach a bunch of girls how to defend themselves. They are grateful to us.
Adrenaline is flowing. Next thing you know, Isabel and Brittany are kissing us on the mouth.
You can be our club advisor.
You know, my mom did say I need to pick up a hobby.
Welcome to our fucking fight club.
Let's get it popping in this motherfucker.
Bitch, I'm here to take that crown. Make her move it up and down.
Yes, queen! Slay!
I want that trophy.
To have a safe space like this, it means a lot to people. I'm gonna finally reverse stalk my stalker.
Yeah.
I'll be able to kill my stepdad.
Awesome.
Okay.
He seems so supportive of women, especially the hot ones.
Men need therapy.
Are you cheating on me?
No!
I literally saw you yesterday.
Shut up, nerd! I fucked your mom!
We are literally at the bottom. We have nowhere to go but up.
Your club is over.
They deserve a shot at showing everybody how fucking cool they are.
Let's go fuck up some football players.
I want that trophy.
You created a fight club to get some coochie. You don't even know how to work that thing. I know y'all ain't tickling the pearl.
I just don't know if you're supposed to be talking to us like that, just like as a teacher.
this is Bottoms. PJ and Josie are two unpopular, horny, queer, lesbian teenagers. In an attempt to gain the attention of the respected crushes and to get laid, they start a self-defense club, read Female Fight Club. Everything seems to be going according to plan until their myriad lies are unearthed and they are faced with embarrassment and ruin. They must then work to redeem themselves in the eyes of those they hurt and come to the rescue of those who never really saw them in the first place.
Can I say before we get started, if you haven't seen Bottoms, and I'm assuming most people haven't because it's just not, I mean, it's still in theaters, but it's go fucking see Bottoms. Go see it in the theaters. Please support this film. I mean, not that that's ever going to do anything, but please support this film because it is so fucking good. And this is the type of movie that we should be supporting. Mm-hmm. I mean, Shiva Baby was brilliant. This is, I mean, and again, I don't say this with hyperbole. I really believe, I mean, this is this generation's Heathers. Yeah. This is as good and as subversive and as, you know, I don't know, on point as Heathers was in '89 as this. I mean, and so, and I know that gets thrown around. I mean, because of Heathers as being what it is. I don't think anything's come close to it except for Bottoms. As being like one of the best teen movies that really was like exposing shit and like putting a finger on things that weren't being talked about.
Right.
that they are now.
Right. And it's not even, I really hesitate to call it like a teen comedy or a raunchy teen comedy because it is so meta in its approach to this. It is at once a satire of these movies, but also a sincere version of these films. It is so brilliant to see how it is at one point it is winking at you, and the next it's taking itself seriously, and you're not really sure when the either is happening.
Right.
That is so hard to pull off.
Yeah.
It's so hard to pull off. And I know that like the Apatow comparison and the Booksmart comparison is being thrown around, but I don't think so. I think this is so much smarter than those films.
Yeah, I get it, but neither one. But
that's an easy.
But let's take Superbad and Booksmart, which are probably the and as far as the spectrum, Superbad's probably the most. Is the highest grossing teen film of all time, and Booksmart is one of the first ones to really introduce lesbian protagonists who are seeking out a lesbian relationship, in high school. But they are still Superbad you can kind of put in the corner because Superbad is just a bro comedy more than anything else. I'm not saying it's not good, and I'm not saying it has its good. I mean, I think Sarah is brilliant. I think there's some really, really funny moments in Superbad, and as an overall comedy, I think it really works. And as far as like an Apatow driven comedy, I also think it works because it's one of the shorter ones and it doesn't overstay its welcome. Superbad doesn't know what to do with its females characters, right? They're still sexual objects. And again, this is a movie about high school kids. I get that. And because Bottoms does some of the similar stuff, right? But it does it so much better.
Yeah.
In this case, Emma Stone and I forget the girl who played Michael Cera's love interest, they're really just seen as characters to fuel the sexual desire of men, or these young boys anyway. And so really they're not really given much to do. I mean, I think it is a breakout performance for Emma Stone, but just because she's so wonderful on screen, right? I mean, it's not really, it's just mainly because she's good. The role's not that great for her, right?
She's doing a lot with a little.
Right. And it's another one of those, it's a weird trope too of like Jonah Hill and Emma Stone. Not that I'm saying that relationship can't happen in real life, but it's a sitcom trope.
Well, I hope it never does, considering what we've learned about Jonah Hill and women wearing bathing suits and surfing.
I don't think Jonah Hill was like, well, maybe he was always like that. Coming up in this, I think this perversion of the Hollywood system and like these people who are driven to kind of take advantage of it in a sense of like, but also it's this, we're in a weird time of this weird like level
period, Jason. Sure. We're in a weird time.
But we're always in a weird time, but we're in a weird time. We're in a weird time for like this like level of false allyship, but also this male fragility that exists as well. So all of that new age double speak that came out from Jonah in his text messages and whatever. It's just really bizarre. Yeah. Look, it's a confusing time to be a white guy. Let's just put it out there.
But this is interesting you bring this up because no. But we see some of that in Bottoms too, right? Some of the kind of like
the whole fucking fragility thing is on display.
Men need therapy, right?
Look, to put a pen in the other pieces of it, I think what Bottoms does is again takes all of this. I will applaud Booksmart for showing a high school system that I truly hope exists. One that's inclusive and one that doesn't give a shit about homosexuality or I mean like really doesn't give a shit, like just completely ignores is open to gender fluidity. I hope all of that exists, right? I don't necessarily know if it does or not, but I hope that the message there is.
Because you're not hanging out around high schools?
Definitely not.
Good.
And the one thing I will say but Booksmart still had that sort of like, it couldn't let go of we're going to have that, it's Carrie Fisher's daughter. And there's these fantastical drunk characters that are hyper rich. That kind of undercuts and then they've got to be these people, like real, like brilliant high school set movies don't do that. Right. They stay grounded. Superbad, for the most part, stayed grounded. Fast Times at Ridgemont High stayed grounded. These movies, and say what you will about the John Hughes. And I don't think history's been kind to the John Hughes films, but I mean, I have a soft spot for them because I grew up with them.
We grew up, yeah.
But I mean, like, they didn't tell a true story. They told a desired story of high school, but they also sold a really rich white version of high school that had very little concern for any sort of minority characters or characters that were outside of the norm.
In fact, they became sort of punching bags and used as jokes.
Right. The best one, I think, really, I mean, like, you can argue Pretty in Pink and Some Kind of Wonderful, which I know he didn't direct, that was Dutch. But Weird Science is probably the one that really kind of like works the best as like two boys who are just trying to fit in and don't really, I mean, they're still like highly privileged white kids, right.
So
it's weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, like, but going back to the Heathers comparison, like Bottoms is this like hyper-realized, surrealist version of high school that you really can't ever get comfortable in, right?
Yeah.
Because you are presented with a we're going to present ourselves as more than we are to get the girls that we want, and now these are two girls that want to get the girls that we want. So it's obviously there's different there, but then but yeah, that's the main story, and then everything else around them is just bonkers.
It's so, I mean, it really is like a parallel universe. I mean, they go to school and everyone is very aware that no one is learning at school. The students, the teachers, that nobody cares, and I love this. I mean, I love that kind of approach. And there's a high school homecoming game coming up against Huntington, but it's been like 25 years in the making or something. And this Huntington is this town that is full of like murderers and thugs and are killing people, but they're not. It's just all this like everyone just buys into these stories. It's so brilliant.
Yeah, so the movie starts off with they're going to a high school fair, a carnival or whatever, and homecoming. It's the beginning of the school year, basically. So we start off and we meet our two heroes, right? And they're basically talking about how they want to fuck these two girls in high school. And
this is the year.
And this is the year that we're finally seeing
get into that,
which is so good, right? It's so like good, like that they put a spin on all of it, right?
Yes,
because this is the American Pie setup, right? Oh, we're finally seniors. Right. We're finally going to get fucked now. We're finally going to do it, right?
Right.
So it's these two nerdy, and nerdy to obviously they're dressed up 25-year-olds or 30-year-olds, whatever.
Right. They're like 20, 28, 27, 28.
This is a point of contention for me because
anyway, I know. It's you're looking at adult women playing high schoolers, and you're conflicted about the level that you find them attractive.
Right.
And you're like, should I not be finding them attractive? This also, I think, says that what we like nerdy girls. I don't know. Like, what is that? Oh, okay, sure, but yeah. But I think again, these movies know that, and they play on this suspension of disbelief, and like that's I mean,
and that's how you get adults to go see it. It's still creepy. I don't know how to really process it, but it's creepy, and I realize that. I'll just put it at that point.
Well, okay, yeah.
I'll show myself out.
Yeah, good. The rest of this podcast will just be another hour and a half of me.
So they go to this carnival, this high school carnival, and they basically walk in and they're like, this high school doesn't hate us because we're gay. They hate us because we're losers. We're not talented.
Because we're ugly, untalented, and gay. It's like, but but this goes back to that idea you just said about how it's not really about the being gay. It's just like, we just don't like that you're a loser. So the queerness of the high school is in a way very much accepted,
right? Because there was the one gay kid who's in theater, and they're like all excited about
everybody loves him, right?
Everyone loves him. Everyone wants to know what the new show is for the year, kind of thing.
Yeah. That was good.
They obviously have an awkward interaction with the two love interests at the carnival, in a really funny back and forth.
Hot dogs are a theme,
right? Yeah, no shit. Really,
right. Moskowitz loves hot dogs, and in this film, right, Sennott is talking to Kaya Gerber. It's like, let's get a hot dog, and she's like, no buns. And she's like, you can eat a bun. Come on.
So one of the girls is kind of a Instagram influencer that they're in love with, and the other one is just a cheerleader.
Right. She's the cheerleader,
right?
I mean, she's the quarterback's girlfriend,
and her, and the quarterback is obviously a worshipped deity at the high school. So much so that even all the other high school football players, hold him up on a pedestal.
Yeah.
And he's dating the head cheerleader. They get into a fight. The two girls they basically offer her a ride home.
They offer her a safe space.
Right. Yes.
Do you need a safety ride home?
And then
they're even playing on this language, right, of trauma and safety. It's so good.
And then the white fragility comes in because the football player is out front. And I thought this was that he looks like the Skarsgård kid who plays not Skarsgård, but the one who plays Pennywise in it. He looks like a younger version of that guy. I don't know who he is in real life, but
he is in the actor is in that red, white, and blue and Red and Royal Blue. Is that the new film? So he's in that. I mean,
okay. So they tap him with their car accidentally, and of course they hit his knee. He immediately, they barely get his knee, and he falls down. And all the other football players are around him. They cradle his head, scream up to the star, scream up to the sky about why this is possibly happening. And then they figure out that the way in is obviously to create this group that is going to help teach self-defense, because these girls have also been at juvie all summer long it's a rumor that's getting passed around that they've been in juvie.
And Sennott tosses it off as a joke to one of their other kind of colleagues / friends, and she's like, "Oh my God, you're in juvie?" And she's like, "No," and then it just keeps going, and she's like, "Okay, let's just lean into it."
Right.
But again, it's such a kind of high school thing too, right? This just running with that lie to kind of keep. Well, I mean, not just high school. We do this all the time, right? But to just kind of keep going into that until it all blows up in your face.
They sit down in class the next day, and in the corner of the class, and of course they only have really one class, and then they go to gym. In the corner of the classroom is a caged, shirtless football player, which is just obviously a specter of male violence that's always at the ready. This movie does so many things like that, but it doesn't address them, right? I mean, until it does, right? I mean, obviously that rage. So when they start the Fight Club, eventually it comes out that they might be frauds and they weren't really going to juvie, and it comes out eventually that they're only doing this to get sex. But the football player, one of the football players, turns that on them and then basically tries to expose them as frauds by saying, well, you can't even, you can fight, but really what we're going to do is, and then so that they release this gigantic, huge man to fight this girl to prove that men and women, that women can't actually compete with men, and especially in physical sports. I don't know, there's so much stuff like this. It turns out that the lead football player is cheating on the girl on the head cheerleader with the mother of one of the other girls that's in the Fight Club, kind of this mousy-ear girl who's kind of the moral center of the film.
And who's actually, kind of running the Fight Club and understands the value of this Fight Club and what it is actually given to everyone else. Right? This kind of camaraderie, but also a sense of purpose, right? A sense of belonging and a sense of strength, I think. Yeah.
And then in the midst of all this, you're thrown in Marshawn Lynch, who's going through a divorce. He's a gym teacher who's going through divorce.
He's their biology.
Oh, that's right.
I don't know what he is, because then they talk about feminism in class.
Right. He's just their only teacher, right? And then when he gets pissed off and talks about how feminism is a lie, and he changes all of the classroom subjects.
Amelia Earhart is a fake hero. Lots of men flew planes and didn't crash.
Oh man, this movie's so good. It's so good.
It really is. There's so much to miss too. I mean, I'm gonna have to watch this multiple times to catch everything, because there's at one moment when everyone else in the Fight Club figures out what our two heroes have been doing. A black girl stands up and she's like, "This is just second wave feminism all over again," right?
And just walks up.
And I'm I laughed so loud. I was the only one laughing at that line in the theater. There were only 3 people in there, but at the time. But lines like that come so fast and then are gone.
Yeah,
it's so good. And again, Marshawn Lynch, really clever. Kaya Gerber and Havana Rose Liu are sort of like the two crushes, right? And and I'm sure that people caught this, but again, something else that I just thought was really smart was where Kaya Gerber's like, no one knows that I like worked really hard and I have my own like jewelry business. I have this and I have that. And I was like, really? And she's like, yes, see? And then when Havana Liu goes back to Jeff, our quarterback, right? She breaks up with him and then ends up back with him. Kaya Gerber goes, well, my identity is tied to her. And I was
completely
like, it's
disappears.
so smart. But it's so smart. And it's so really astute in its perception of not just high school age young women and men, but kind of everyone.
Yeah, I mean, all of it, all of this, like every trope that they take down, is from the big game to the hated rival to the football team that really doesn't do anything to the elongated, bloody, gory fight sequence, where our heroes finally, and our whole girl fight club kind of takes back and realizes.
I think you killed that guy.
I was like,
yeah. No, he's dead. He's definitely dead.
I think there's a few things to fault. I think a lot of things that are default mainly fall on. Just again, it's a hard line to balance perfect comedy in this sense. So like. And you only have a limited budget, and so like a lot of the people that they got that were in the film were local hires where they were filming. So like not every bit I think works 100%, but I mean that's really honestly it's such a small part because everything else is so smart about this movie. Again, like seeing it so many times, like wanting to see it again, and it's not available on streaming yet. But there's so much like even in the background from the posters and the walls and like and just the shit that's written on the chalkboard and things like that.
I know, right? And you're just trying to read everything and you can't. There's so much there. There's so much thought went into that. And the like Sistine Chapel painting, right, of the quarterback reaching out to touch the football. It's great. And I mean, she had so much more money to do this film than she did Shiva Baby. I read that there's a great article in the latest issue of New York Magazine that talks, or that is kind of a profile on all three of these main components. That sounded objectifying, but I think you know what I mean, of Seligman, Sennott, and Edeberi, who all went to Tisch together. They were around the same time. And so Sennott was in the short film Shiva Baby and then did the feature. And so she and Seligman became close and they started talking about this like at that point. So they've been working on it for a while. They meet like once a week to work on the script. And then Seligman figured out that Sennott knew Edeberi and she's like, that's who I want is Josie. You know her? Cool. And so it all kind of came together, the three of them. And they were talking about how they were working on like the crew were these 40 and 50-year-old Teamsters. And they were like, most of them were nice. right. These three women kind of telling them what to do. Like most of them were really lovely. But I like that. So something that I think is interesting about this too is that Seligman identified as bisexual, but then she stopped dating men. So I guess she would identify as a lesbian. But the other two won't be pinned down on their sexual identity, which I think, again, like not complicates the film, but isn't saying like, oh, we're two straight women playing like gay women, right? Their whole thing is like, why does it matter? Why do you care how we identify in this way? Just like leave it alone.
I heard one criticism of the film is that it doesn't quite go hard enough on the sex scenes or the one lesbian sex scene.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you have a take on? I mean,
what's your take? So I didn't. I'll give you Seligman's take.
And I think Seligman's take is my take. I think it's so. Go ahead.
She didn't feel confident in showing it. She didn't think she could show it well enough, so she didn't. But I think has been. I think she's aware of that criticism too, and that's her. I mean, look, I don't know. I mean, my take is that it's implied, and I think that's fine. I think if it goes further, do you risk this kind of male gaze?
Right, and that's my take. Right, is that so many times and such historically that these, like, if you take blue as a woman's color, for example, where like. how can you not think that that's made for the male gaze?
Well, and it turns out it was.
Right. And so you risk I think you risk changing, and again, I need to finish my thought. I think you risk damaging your film if you go too far with that. I get the sentiment that we need to break boundaries there, but honestly, I don't really know. Like, again, I appreciate Cinnamon's lack of confidence in that case and caution because look, this is not something that hasn't been portrayed on film for a really long time, and specifically for salacious reasons, right? And also, if you go back to, like, if we are categorizing this as a teen film, and that's something we want, like, again, you talk, Heathers is meant to punch Hughes in the nose, right? It's meant to take those rich white ideals and fuck them up and David Lynch in them. I mean, essentially. And so to this extent, I think you do want Bottoms to be a teen film. I do think this is something that should reach out to, and I think it will. But if you look at the films that have sexuality and explicit sexuality in them, specifically the Hughes films, I mean, they're all about the male gaze, right? I mean, like, the opening shower scene in 16 Candles is nothing other than objectifying a girl. Like, and so I think that I don't think it's necessary in this case, right? I think that's one of the things I think Booksmart did a really good job with, is the kind of fumbling, awkward initial sex scene was, I think, handled really well in Booksmart. I think this one was fun. I think it was nice. I think it was, I mean, and I didn't want it to, I wouldn't want it to be that moment of the movie that's replayed over and over and over again because we get to see two girls go at it. I think that's, I mean, like, it just undercuts everything we're trying to accomplish with, but I also get the point. But I mean, I don't know, like, I don't think we're in an era of let's display sexuality in this sense to kind of progress some sort of, because again, we've portrayed sexuality in such poor terms historically in films that it's going to take something really transgressive to progressive to move the needle in a positive way. Because again, as we try to do it, or you think you're trying to do it in something like Blue is the Warmest Color, ends up just being subverted but you're just going to fast forward to the good parts. Right? It's just like, you know what I'm saying? And I don't
quote, he meant quote unquote good parts.
Right. I don't mean, I'd say that
Léa Seydoux and Adele Exarchopoulos are two of our most underrated actors working today.
Yeah, agreed.
That was my Sean Penn moment. but I think
what's funny about their names?
I think there's a callback in this film to that, where at the end of the film, to provide a distraction, Sennott kisses another girl, and everyone's kind of looking, and then Kaya Gerber, who was Sennett's crush, goes, "Oh yeah, I'm not gay. I just like gay porn." But I think that is a kind of reference to this. Oh, you want to watch this thing, all right? You want to sort of see this. And I really, again, that was something smart that you can think just applies to her, but then it's like everybody else. And I think showing too much of the sex scene, you run the risk of now becoming like Revenge of the Nerds.
Right. Especially because of the whole conceit. I mean, that's where I'm sure you were going, right? Is that these girls are lying to these, right? And so they're setting up two other girls based on false pretenses, which I kind of bristle at a little bit, because I feel like we're the pendulum swinging too far into this idea of like, we've got to completely be ourselves, and we got to I feel like the criticism is a bizarre kind of misplaced one, where we can't put on a better I mean, like, again, I'm not saying lie. I'm not saying go out and do the MTV pickup artist bullshit, right? I'm not. But this idea that teenagers would try to learn French to get, sit next to a girl in French class. Right. I think it's a little silly to start picking apart the motivations of youth to get sex. Yeah. Look, I want all of it to be consensual, right?
Right.
And I don't, but I hesitate to say that, we can't,
Yeah, I know. We can't embellish a little, or
Yeah. Exactly.
Do you know that every time I tell a story, and I tell the same stories over and over, folks, it gets bigger and bigger each time, and I make more and more stuff up, right? I accomplish more and more each time I tell these stories. So
Brock's not really 7'3".
It's true. It's true. Now you know. Just a couple more details about, I think, really the making of this film. No one would agree to product placement deals.
That's nice.
which is so 2023, right? To think of any corporation and how many corporations have floats and pride parades, but won't put their products in this film.
Oh, you're saying that no one would agree to put their products in the movie. I got you.
Yeah. What'd you think I meant? Like toys?
No, I thought you meant that Cinnamon to turn down product placement.
Oh, no.
Okay.
So, I mean, this is something else that's really interesting about this film, too, is that time frame is never, I mean, it's set in current times, but there is no technology.
Right.
You can look at the cars and you're like, okay, that's a recent model car, so you can sort of figure that out. But there's only one cell phone and it's a flip phone, right? But there's no iPhones, there's no Android, there's nothing. which again I love because it's this kind of like nebulous. This is where we are, right? I mean, just kind of wherever it is where it is. But also a lot of the first choice locations Seligman wanted to shoot in, she got turned down or pushed away because the New Orleans Archdiocese read an article in W Magazine. Yes, yeah, I know.
Those are words I thought I'd hear today.
Right. And so they pushed back on all this. They kind of wielded their influence to sort of get them, turned down. So they ended up shooting at like an abandoned elementary school and a small HBCU.
At a certain point, do you not like money?
I know.
You know it's going to get done, right? I mean, it's going to get done.
So why not take the
right?
Yeah. I just. But again, this is the year of our Lord, 2023, and we're like, oh my God, girl on girl action. I'm so sorry, we can't abide by that, right? AT&T and Apple are going to have their floats in your gay pride parade, but you can't use our stuff. I'm sorry. It's ridiculous. Here's a question that I want to ask you about this. Well, not really about this film, but about these three. What's next? And what I mean is, are they going to keep making weird, cool shit, or are they going to get gobbled up by the IP monster?
Cinnamon, you mean? Or these actresses?
All three of them, yeah.
I mean, hopefully not.
Yeah, because
right. I mean,
Edeberi has a shoot for Marvel's Thunderbolts or something. She's gonna do something for that after the strike.
I'm okay with the actresses. I'm okay with them doing Cassavetes, right? I'm okay with them doing the Dirty Dozen.
Yeah. As long as they come back and do Bottoms Up.
Right.
That's the sequel.
Yes. I can't imagine. I mean, I don't know. You take someone like Elizabeth Banks,
who produced this film. I mean, her company produced
it. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what the sentiment. I would think that I don't know. You see Bambi and you see Chronicles of Narnia and I don't know. I don't know if, I hope not. I guess is my answer to that question.
That's the right answer.
I hope that they stick to personal storytelling. And I hope that something then breaks out, right? I mean, take what where Banks kind of breaks out with Pitch Perfect or something along those lines, where and then you can make things that speak to you. Because if you look at Banks's, and I'm not a huge fan of her work, to be quite honest. I mean, I'm a huge fan of her being an actress. I think she's funny. I think she works really well with when she's with the State guys or anything like that. But I don't find her sensibilities as a director all that intriguing. Charlie's Angels really didn't have much going for it. I did not find Cocaine Bear. Cocaine Bear to me was Snakes on a Plane. It is a title of a movie that sounds like it's going to be fun, and then when you actually get
it wasn't stimulating.
Right? It's just not. Yes.
And the come down after the movie was.
Right. And I kept having to watch it over and over again more and more times in order to get the same sort of thrill from it just watching it once.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, like, I don't know. Like, to me, I would rather see Elizabeth Banks in front of the camera
instead of behind it,
doing something that's fun. And again, I understand there's more money and there's more control. But and again, I don't necessarily find like her keeping going back to the well of Pitch Perfect, and I understand why, because there's money behind it. But I don't find Cocaine Bear or Charlie's Angels to be particularly compelling personal stories. Now, again, I don't know if that's what you wanted to do, but Cinnamon coming from Shiva Baby and Bottoms, I hope that there's more stories being told here. I hope that she gets some sort of avenue on Netflix or something to do kind of a Wes Anderson, Baumbach type of, female version of those guys who get to do the stories that they want to tell over and over and over again. Because, I mean, she's really clearly got talent. This should be kind of an Apatow, like the best bet would be for her just to kind of go the Apatow route. Mm-hmm. Is to start building and building on getting more and more budgetary, higher budgets for each of her movies coming out so she can do more and more and more. So,
and she can do her own version of This Is 40, which would be...
I never watched that. It sounded awful, so I just decided. I'm not a big fan of and again, as we go into Minnie and Moskowitz and A Woman Under the Influence, of like these like pseudo comedic films that are like supposedly slice of life real, because it's very like if you look at Cassavetes, what he does well is not what those guys do well. You take something like Rob Reiner's This Is Us, that awful Michelle Pfeiffer, Bruce Willis film. These and then even like I forget who directed it, but the Vince Vaughn, Jennifer Aniston, The Breakup. These movies that like try to make you laugh in this sense of like uncomfortable negativity. Like it's a hard thing to pull off. Which I think, going back to Bottoms, one last point before we get off of Bottoms before we get off of Bottoms and go into Cassavetes, is that I think it's what Cinnamon does so well here is makes a good movie while also sending up the movies that she's trying to make, right? Yeah. Because this is a solid, feel-good, funny film. And it's not just because they're poking fun at the shit that came before it. And so, like, it's the same thing. Again, I keep going back to Heathers. It's the same thing of Heathers. These are these movies that it knows its boundaries, and it knows first and foremost it's got to tell a good story. It's got to tell a compelling story. And our two leads are wonderful. The two love interests have agency, and they're wonderful together. And then everything else, like it's a fucking godsend that you find Marshawn Lynch who can improvise. Did you know that whole sequence when they're when they're sitting in the car and they're talking about their lives together and what their future lives are going to be, and she's going to marry a guy who's in the closet? That whole was improvised by her.
Well, they are hilarious. Yeah, the two of them are so funny. Yeah. Have you watched? Excuse me. Have you watched any of the Ayo and Rachel Are Single shorts?
Not yet.
Oh my, they're brilliant. They are. I don't have enough superlatives to talk about how good they are. They are so smart and so sharp, and the two of them play so well together. But it's like that scene is like one of those shorts. It's so good. But the kids know something's off. I mean,
yeah, she has. They're sitting there talking and lamenting their lives because they went up and they've shot their shot with the girls that they wanted to get with. And they missed, so they were in their car lamenting their lives and lamenting their senior year for sure. And Ayo starts to go off about how she's gay, but she's going to marry a closeted straight boy, and they're going to go off and have kids, and the kids are going to know something's off. And it's like this 5-minute long monologue that she completely improvises, and it's awesome.
Oh, it's great. Yeah, so check out Ayo and Rachel Are Single. It aired on Comedy Central for like a season, but these are like 5-minute like skits, and they're just... Man, they're brilliant. So yeah, go see Bottoms, everybody, and let us know how right we were about the brilliance of that film.
Tell us how good we are.
Yeah, tell us how smart we are. Okay, Jason, are you ready to talk about Minnie and Moskowitz? I keep saying Moskowitz.
right. Yeah, same here. Let's talk about the Disney feature Minnie Moskowitz.
If this were a Disney cartoon.
John Cassavetes has a continuing love affair with people. He finds them fascinating. Now he reaches into the crowd and picks a couple of rare originals.
Seymour Moskowitz.
Many more.
Minnie and Moskowitz. It's that kind of a love story. Jenna Rollins is Minnie.
Get more aroused, more willing to give of myself.
Seymour Cassell is Moskowitz.
When I first looked at you, I said, there she is, that's the girl.
The reviewers and critics just flipped. Comments Time magazine, one of 1971's 10 best pictures. One of the few movies in recent times that could be called joyous.
Nuts. You're absolutely nuts.
From the Saturday Review, Minnie is the best made of the Cassavetes films. It is also the warmest.
It's mainly being alone that makes me so irritated.
From Newsweek, magnificent performances. Seymour Cassell is splendid.
You got a way of looking down on me, of thinking that you're better than they are. Actually, you're just a girl with good looks.
Says New York's Q magazine. Jenna Roland's extraordinarily appealing. I wish she'd make 1 million films.
Let me see that face again. Seymour, it's not the right face. That's not the face I dreamed of. That you're not the guy I'm in love with.
The New York Daily News, 4 stars. A human, very funny comedy.
You want to marry this bum? Go ahead and marry him.
Get in the car.
No!
Get in the car.
No! No!
Get in the
No!
And from Mademoiselle magazine, it's a masterpiece of wackiness.
No sense of you, absolutely none.
Yeah, well, you're disgusting.
You have something that belongs to me.
No, listen. No.
Cassavetes people are screamingly funny,
No! Stop it!
painfully funny, achingly funny.
I mean, it just happened, Minnie. I mean, it started and it just happened. I don't know.
Don't you understand that it's not there, Seymour? It just isn't there.
Says Newsday, Minnie and Moskowitz is the best American movie of 1971 because of what it is and what it represents.
All right. Depressed and jaded after being dumped by her married boyfriend, aging beauty Minnie Moore wonders if she'll ever find love. After shaggy-haired parking lot attendant Seymour Moskowitz comes to her defense from an angry and rebuffed blind date, he falls hopelessly in love with her despite their myriad differences. I've used myriad twice today. Sorry. Minnie reluctantly agrees to a date with Moskowitz, and slowly but surely an unlikely romance blossoms between the two.
If there is going to be a deciding factor why someone listened or not listened to this podcast, you saying myriad once is going to be it.
Hey, I do what I can.
Did that fucking guy just say myriad?
Twice.
Fuck this shit.
That's it.
I've heard that word somewhere else. It was this goddamn podcast? Fuck this shit. I'm out.
this guy thinks he's smart.
I got a yeehaw on my goddamn license plate.
Yeah,
I don't listen to this shit.
Bill Hicks was right.
Sorry, I derailed you.
No, because that was it. But here's I'm going to throw this in now, I think, because I think this film does it the most. There are, and maybe all of Cassavetes' films seem to be about how men fail women over and over and over and over and over again. And I think in this one, all we see is Minnie, is Gina Rowlands, being failed by every male in her life at every turn.
Yeah.
You know, despite the kind of perceived or shown happy ending of this film, which is kind of a flash forward and in a party in the backyard with kids and family, right? And it looks great, but so much of it is just her not doing anything wrong and being failed.
Well, she doesn't know how tall and lovely she is.
She doesn't. I mean, I said to myself, this is her. This is the girl.
Do you know how tall and lovely you are?
You got great skin.
Yeah. Which is a lot coming from that guy.
Dude, I have to tell you a story. Sorry. So I used to hang out in this kind of like, very blue collar, like, beer and whiskey joint. And it was like right behind where we all went to high school. And so we all ended up drinking there. I'm not kidding.
Right. And so this, going back to Brock's previous statement, he used to hang out behiund a Bed Bath & Beyond, basically.
Because that's, yes, that's what I did, right? Behind the dumpster. It was fine. And so, like, we all drank there. It was populated by the doomed. Anyway, we're all hanging out one night. We're probably like 22, 23 years old. And there was this regular there whose name was Dale. Dale was like 5'1", was a kind of biker, big beard, always wore a bandana. Anyway, my friend, she was up at the bar ordering a drink. And Dale walks up and says to her, "You got pretty elbows." And that was it. There's the story.
Did it work?
It did not.
Yeah.
Dale was in his 50s.
That's not the first time Dale said that, though.
So you've seen, no. No, I'm pretty sure Dale, and this is like, I don't mean to sort of talk poorly about Dale, but you've seen Lord of the Rings, right? You know, the dwarf, Dale looked like that guy.
Okay.
I mean, really. So
he had
he could only see the elbows.
Right, he had a good vantage point of elbows. Right.
But he wasn't a dwarf, is what I'm trying to get at. Okay, all right. I'm just going to dig a hole here. Anyway, Moskowitz has a big mustache, which also made me think of Dale.
I should give him a ladder. Dale is not climbing out.
No, not even with his face.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Seymour. You were explaining Seymour.
No.
Seymour
I was talking about how like men fail all these, men fail the women in Cassavetes films, and especially this film. And then we started talking about, you know, she was tall and lovely and like wonderful skin, and then I started talking about elbows. So I'm very sorry. It's my fault.
No. It's both of our faults if it's any of us. We go in this hand in hand, elbow and elbow. We march forward.
Purdy elbow to purdy elbow.
Luckily, we both know how tall and lovely we each are, so that we can move forward properly.
Also, I'm taller.
You are, and this movie, again, talking about like, it's so hard to describe these films, and it's so hard to kind of like set expectations for people who don't know Cassavetes films, because really there are no films like it. Even The Imitators, there's no films like it. Like, I mean, like we talked about how Mikey and Nicky is the best Cassavetes film that Cassavetes didn't do.
Right.
That's probably the closest, that you're going to get, and even that doesn't have that cinema verite feel that Cassavetes has. Like, May was more of a meticulous film. Like, she obviously, when I say it's kind of weird to say.
I know.
But I mean, yeah, she's letting the camera roll. But I mean, she also had a more Hollywood style of filming her films. Yeah. For Cassavetes, this is, you feel like you're dropped in, and you're not. Like, what I love about this is that, is that Seymour goes to these films and Minnie goes to, they are obviously connoisseurs of films. But we get these like very ridiculous, short, brief, where a normal filmmaker would, give you a whole scene of what they were watching. You get this bizarre snippet of Maltese Falcon and the bizarre film of Casablanca.
But it's the comments we get about the films, right? Where Gina Rounds or Minnie's like, films lie to you. It's just an illusion, right? Which is just such a great, I think, like Cassavetes almost like fuck you to everyone expecting a conventional sort of thing.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. The movies are a lie. Right.
and it's not even Altman-esque where there's like mapping, multiple layers of dialogue. You'll just get cut off in the middle of a sentence. Kind of stuff. You'll just, or in the middle of a thought. This is so real life that we just bounce around and we're cut out of scenes when we want to follow characters further on.
Well, I love too that, I mean, Seymour at the end of this long like opening kind of like prologue goes to see his mother. And she's like, what do you need? You need money? And he just goes, I'm going to California. Cut. Boom. Right. And then you're like,
it really is like, as much as you're willing to give Cassavetes the like and go along with the ride, right? It really is jarring, and and this feels like we're like you're going from faces to husbands and black and white to color. I mean, this feels like the further on transition from husbands, right? This feels like him getting kind of control back over the editing. Where Husbands still seems like it's the more studio-friendly picture, even though this one was supposed to be geared towards that, right? And even though studios had no idea how to market this or what to do with it. But yeah, it seems like you're taking a concerted step in his evolution from, as a filmmaker going into this movie and kind of getting into that. And studios at this point are coming off of Easy Rider and other types of like kind of like avant-garde hippie culture. And which is why probably this gets greenlit in the first place, is you've got Cassell and you've got this idea of this kind of counterculture that exists in the underbelly. Although this is not what this movie is about. This is about a going on middle-aged woman, and middle-aged is maybe too harsh, but, she's definitely out. She's coming into her 40s. Yeah.
And she's wondering about like being alone and feeling alone and what is it going to be like kind of going forward too.
And it, so do you see this movie as a comedy?
Not really. No, but it is in ways funny. I mean, I think Cassell's acting is so big And it's sometimes cartoonish or buffoonish, but I don't think it really ever falls into the comedy setting because it is so harsh as well.
Well, all of the men in this are so quick to anger. Like it just feels like everybody in the 70s was just willing to snap at a moment's notice. It was like with the gas crisis, or like is that really puts everyone on edge? Like they seemingly, and which is crazy too, because they seemingly have these great lives where on these minuscule jobs that they have, where they're living in, in relatively nice places to live.
Well, yeah, this is, I mean, Minnie is a curator at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. Seymour is a parking attendant whose only real dream is to get a more steady job at a bigger parking garage.
Not a restaurant, because if people don't like the food,
people don't like the food, and that affects me.
A guy who hasn't thought, like, this is an extension of him in Faces, right? He's not a surfer anymore, but this is the extension of his character in Faces, where this is a guy who has not thought 2 seconds ahead of the current
doesn't
situation.
Want to,
right?
And doesn't think anyone else should either. I mean, he even tells Minnie, "You take yourself too seriously. Like, what are you doing? Like lighten up, lady." right. So yeah, no, he is very much this kind of like carefree, kind of do what he wants. Look, and really, what he wants is just a hot dog.
But going back to like explaining this movie that is called Minnie and Moskowitz, it's 13 minutes in before we get the credits.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's 40 minutes in before they meet.
Yep.
This is a 2 hour. This is one of the shorter Cassavetes films. This is a 2 hour film, a movie about two people. They don't meet until just about the hour mark.
Yeah.
It's bonkers. Like it's crazy. That opening sequence,
and that was cut from, I think, the original theatrical version, right?
Yeah, the opening sequence. And what's the actor's name who plays Morgan?
Timothy Carey.
Yes, Timothy Carey. I knew it was. I was going to say I knew it was Timothy, and I was. That whole sequence is so fucking brilliant and so unscripted, and like it's just that guy going on. I could watch that for 2 hours
over and over and over. Yeah,
it is so. Seymour gets off of his job parking cars. He goes in to get something. He's got a hot dog, a beer, and a coffee at this local diner, and he's sitting down next to this guy. And this guy is just taking up space in this diner. And he goes off on this 5-minute soliloquy about, just kind of ribbing Seymour, calling him his son, telling him he can't get his jackets off because his elbow's gotten too fat, and then talking about how he's gotten fat and like he's skinny up, or he's big up top and skinny down. His legs are skinny, and then he starts going into this poem, and like he's annoying Seymour Cassell with all of his stories, and this guy is, and he's like sweaty and gross, and like he's just like. He's just so intimidating.
He has a distinct face anyway,
right?
And even more so when he's sweaty and gross.
But the waitress comes over and she's like, I need this table, and like he keeps asking her for like water with clots of ice and a toothpick. He's like, I lose teeth in this place. Actually, guys, I can charge you. And Seymour tries to give him $1 so he can buy something to eat, and like he picks up a hot dog off Seymour's plate and eats it. He tries to give him $1. He's like, no, I can't take this $1, and he starts reciting this poem, which is a brilliant, beautiful poem. And then the waitress comes back, and he's like, you have a lot of freckles on your face. I like that. My ex-wife had freckles all over her ass, and that's the end of his fucking scene. That's the end of his scene.
That's it. I also love when Cassell starts just kind of meandering through different bars and sort of like popping in different places, and at one
and using your elbows are pretty line basically.
Yeah, no, I love this where he stops at the table and he's like, "Hey, do you remember me? Don't you know me? Don't you know me?" And finally he's like, "That's right, you don't know me," and just walks away.
Yeah, this like weird, like again, and you really never get why this is happening. He's just instigating. It's the same thing with it's the same thing in Mikey and Nicky.
Yeah, when Cassavetes starts poking people at the bar.
Right. And we'll get to.
Yeah, I thought about that scene exactly when he gets chased out. Right.
And so he's just provoking people because he really has nothing better to do. And like the whole funniness of like, do you remember me? Is that Cassell is this long-haired blonde with a fucking handlebar mustache. So it's crazy, a walrus mustache.
It's like eating his face,
right? And so there's no way you could possibly not know,
not remember him,
right?
Yeah. But yeah, no, I don't remember you. That's right. That's right, you don't know me.
And so he goes to California, and then immediately starts parking cars in California. And then we meet Minnie, and Minnie goes on a blind date, and
this is after an uncredited Cassavetes, who's playing her married boyfriend, like smacks the shit out of her.
All right, she's in love with a married man who's played by Cassavetes, and she was out all night with her girlfriend drinking, and because she didn't have anything to eat, all she had was wine. So they were drinking. She came home early in the morning after being dropped off by this cab, and Cassavetes was waiting for her. And then just beats the ever-living shit out of her, and then she comes back in and then it's nothing to him, and he goes and gets him a drink, gets them both a drink. She comes back and she's beating on him, and he's kind of laughing it off, and then they
end up in bed.
Right, they end up in bed together, and he leaves back to his
These kind of
wife.
like toxic, codependent, abusive relationships.
I do find it interesting that Cassavetes kept in that angle of the story, because it does not focus on Minnie or Moskowitz, really.
Right.
It does, and he's uncredited in this Jim role.
Yeah.
But he comes at a certain point. He goes back. He goes back to his home.
Yeah.
After he's been out with Minnie, or he's been in Minnie's apartment, and his wife basically knows what's up.
Yeah.
And he's trying to make small talk and trying to laugh it off, and he's talking to his kids, and the kids come in and it's like, "Hey, mom's crying on the bathroom floor," and evidently she's tried to kill herself. So. Later on, it comes back into play where Jim goes to goes to the museum, brings his eldest son, so the eldest son can make witness to him breaking up with Minnie
in front of a Warhol.
Right, yeah. Which is, I get that last section of it. I guess it's a weird section to me to keep in the kind of the kid scene and the mom committing suicide.
Yeah,
because again, you see how abusive he is to her, and like. I don't necessarily know what that scene really added to the story into Minnie and Moskowitz's story, right? Mm-hmm. I don't really know what that added to their story, because you could have done with him hitting her after she comes home, and then him coming to and this scene could have stayed intact. He could have said, "Look, my wife tried to commit suicide,"
without having to go back to his house and see. Because then, we take the focus off of that's the only time we're with a different character other than those two, right?
Yeah,
like on their own,
right?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think he's just. Who knows? Maybe he really liked his face. He was like, you know what? I'm giving good face to the camera. I'm going to stay.
It's funny too, because like you do kind of get that sense, because when you see him, and it's weird that he's not credited. But when you see him, he's so striking and like domineering in the camera frame. Yeah. Like this is a regular looking dude. If you were to pass him on the street, you would not double take at all.
No.
But like when you see him on camera, it's just this kind of steely-eyed, and like he's not a big guy either.
No, he's tiny. Really. Yeah. But he's got this. Let's see, his eyes are pretty. This is cliche, but they're pretty piercing. Yeah, and he's got this kind of off-kilter way of looking at people. His head's tilted always, like right? just askance, right? It's so magnetic.
He's a lot like Falk in that way.
Yeah.
That Falk that kind of has that kind of, I'm going to make myself smaller, but kind of like still have a very commanding presence kind of thing.
Yeah, and kind of half look at you like I'm sizing you up, like ready to just, like you're trying to figure out, can this guy kick my ass? I don't, maybe?
Right.
Yeah.
That idea of like he's never really comfortable in his own skin and kind of just like always itching to fucking, and that's again the thing with everybody in this movie is they're always itching to fight. They're always itching. They fly off at a handle in a moment's notice. Yeah. They're always put upon it some way. And I feel like this had to have been how the 70s were like and how people were in general, like these indignities that they felt like that were thrust upon them by service industry people or people that they felt that were lower than them. There was always some sort of, how could you be possibly doing this to me? But that whole sequence of like, it does feel like the camera lingers on Cassavetes a little bit when he's on frame in that first moment. Like because he does this like weird, like almost like a Godfather-esque chair twirl. Like, because he's kind of like you see him from the side and he kind of turns to the camera.
Puts a drink down.
Right. And then just goes directly into slapping her. Kind of a side note to that story. Obviously, he didn't slap her in real life, but the way that the shot was framed and the way that the crew was standing, they actually did think he slapped her. So it's like, and Gina was like, well, we know each other. I mean, like, so like, When the crew went,
we know each other. It's cool.
When the crew went to go pick up Gina, they held Cassavetes back.
Oh wow, really?
Yeah, and she kind of milked it for a minute too, and then she was like gave in. But
I would imagine that she gave him a ton of shit.
Oh yeah, for
just
sure.
I mean, for fun and also because he deserved it, right?
Right,
I mean,
right.
Oh yeah,
and I think he probably ate that shit up because I don't think there were a lot of people that like told him no or could stand toe to toe with him and compete.
Yeah, there were probably only a handful of people that could get away with that. Right. I would imagine Falk was probably one.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. Probably Gazzara too, to a certain extent.
To a certain extent, but and even no, what's it? Oh, I can't remember his name now. The producer.
Oh, is it Al Rubin?
Al Rubin, yeah. I want to say Bob Balaban. I'm like, that is not. that is a person.
Right. When I picture Al Rubin in my head, he does look like Bob Balaban.
Probably not someone who's going to like stand up to Cassavetes. Right. It seems like he and Rubin had a good relationship as well.
Yeah, I mean,
in that term where we would be like, "What do you want?" Like, John, what are you doing?
Yeah, I think they went back and forth because Al was the one who edited Husbands,
right?
And so they did have to come back around on Woman Under the Influence, but. So, yeah, we see a scene where Minnie is abused by her boyfriend. He ends up breaking up with her in public. She gets set up on a blind date by her friend, and she's very upset by that. So she goes to lunch, and again, this lunch is just as bad as you think. I mean, like, it is awful. And throughout the film, she wears these gigantic sunglasses to kind of protect herself and hide from herself.
I mean, they're very much like a safety mechanism.
And she's listening to this guy, and she's she's being quiet because she doesn't really know what to say, and she doesn't really want to be there. And this guy is just going off about how, he's not divorced. His wife died. My wife died, so I'm not divorced. And like I have all this money, and I don't know what to do with this money. And he goes, you know what? My big problem is I've got hair down my back and my chest, but my legs are hairless. And she's just, and at that point she's just like, look, I'm
not interested.
I don't want to hurt your feelings. Yeah, I'm not interested. All I really wanted to have was lunch. And then he explodes. They go outside. He tries to get his car, and of course, Seymour Cassel is the one that's why he doesn't want to work in restaurants because the food wasn't good. So
right.
So he gives the car to the guy, and the guy leaves the parking lot, comes back around the parking lot to berate Minnie some more, calling her a whore. And then Cassel gets into a altercation with him. Cassel bloodies his face and then drives off in his truck and takes Minnie for a hot dog. And then he's immediately abusive to her as well.
Yeah.
Like immediately. Like she's still reeling from a man who's basically yelled at her in public in a situation she did not want to be in. She's also coming off of
an abusive relationship, a physically abusive relationship.
In a man that she believes that she's in love with, right? And she doesn't eat the hot dog that Cassel buys for her.
These are Pinks.
They're Pink's hot dogs. I mean, I get it. I get why he's mad, but I don't think he needs to be bad. And so she gets up and walks away. He gets upset with her. Tries to run her down in his truck, which is
on the sidewalk. This
is one of those like it's. I wonder. I know Cassavetes probably didn't ever really care, but like. And you talk about movies that would be hard to be like this doesn't like how do you find an audience for this today?
Yeah.
Like how does this play in a theater today? Like just having like what's the stomach of like okay well this woman's been put upon and it speaks to Cassavetes' genius, right, that he can continue to keep you compelled and invested, and that Rollins doesn't become some sort of like just doormat the entire time. Right. I mean. She understands she's in dangerous situations, and there's lots that happens to her. I guess, do you feel like out of all of it that the relationship and the way that it ends up in marriage is it kind of how do you feel about
I think it's incredibly toxic.
Yeah.
I really do, because I think, and this is why I don't necessarily like the ending, and it's kind of like, oh, it's a happy, and that's why I brought up this idea that men fail her this entire time. I mean, we could even argue that Cassavetes fails her as a character in this film. She falls back into the same kind of toxic relationship that she was in with Jim. Okay, Seymour's not beating her, but at the same time, I mean, there are different levels of abuse, different types of abuse that take place in relationships. And I think that she is just staying with what is comfortable, right? I mean, she was, if it wasn't this other guy on a blind date, it was going to be someone else in the next couple of days. Right, that she's going to fall back into this pattern. It's like, you've seen the movie The Drop, right? at the end, we're supposed to believe on some level that Noomi Rapace gets together with Tom Hardy or gets back together with Tom Hardy. She's doing the same thing, right? She left one violent relationship and is in another violent relationship. Okay, it's a different kind of violent relationship, but it's still that. And I think that's what's going on here as well.
Yeah, because, eventually what happens is that, Minnie and Moskowitz, Minnie and Seymour end up making love. She gets up and leaves the next, or I guess the next morning, or maybe afterwards. After the timeline's confusing, but she goes down. She goes down and she goes to an ice cream shop. She tells the waitress, "Hey, deliver these in 10 minutes. I'm gonna call him." Mm-hmm. And so then she calls Seymour to meet up with her, and he's immediately upset that she's
where'd you go?
She's yelling at him, and she's like, "Look, don't ruin the romance. Like this is all part of it." And then that relationship still devolves into her still not knowing what to do with it, him threatening to hurt himself,
right,
and her stopping him from hurting himself. And then they meet their mothers, and the mothers are like, "You idiots." But again, it's and also that mother sequence is it's so bizarre. It's and I think it's very, very telling how the two mothers handled the so Minnie's mom looks at her with like this, I don't know what to fucking do.
Yeah.
Like, and this kind of loss, and it's not even, maybe not even that. Maybe it's I'm in the same situation, or my life has been the same. And so I'm going to tell Minnie, I'm just going to make the best of it. Right.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell a nice Minnie story about how she looked like Shirley Temple when she was young. Yeah. She had curly hair and she had a lisp. And then Seymour's mom's just like Seymour's a fucking loser.
Yeah.
And she's not Shirley Temple.
Right.
Like they've known each other for 4 days.
What are you doing? What are you thinking?
You're
telling her this?
Right. Yeah. Like why are we even having this conversation? Like he asked me for $400.
Where are they going to live? What are they going to eat? Right.
And she's of the mind, it's like, I don't have a husband to take care of me. Like what do we, it's like, it's like, and that's when the whole Seymour thing about I'm going to get a job at a bigger parking lot, which is a great.
Well, Mrs. Moore, my plan is, and he's so serious and so sincere, right? But yeah, he essentially wears her down to the point where she has no kind of defense left anymore, right? Except to say, okay, right? I love you too. That scene in the bathroom where he's like threatening to hurt himself, he shaves his mustache, right? And punches the wall and hits his head against the wall. And he says a line, something like, "This is what love makes you do. See, it makes you punch the wall. It makes you do this," which, is a good line because it's how we think of it. I mean, what's the line from the James M. Cain novel? "She looks so good, I wanted to hit her with a hammer."
Right.
I mean, it's that idea, right? It's so precious and so beautiful. I just need to destroy it, because I don't know how to handle it.
Right.
And so on one level, like you get that, and on the other, this is not how you behave. And but there's also, I feel like, a class divide or a socioeconomic divide here. I mean, Seymour is a loser. Not because he parks cars, but just because he kind of is, in how he approaches a lot of the world. Minnie seems to be cultivated, a little more cultured. And it's like, what is she doing with this guy in the first place? I love Seymour's enthusiasm about cars and how he kind of can see the world through this idea of cars. Like, what else do you need?
Right.
What else is there? Right.
Do you think this film ends better? And again, not to question Cassavetes, but do you think this movie is a better movie if it ends after the wedding? Like cuts to black right after the wedding? You mean
almost like a Graduate kind of?
Well, I mean,
where there's this.
So there's the wedding. They're clear, and everyone's still in kind of that shocked mode.
Yeah.
And you figure there's some time of this past, but I think what's so wonderful, and I know it was called from real life, but I think what's so wonderful about the wedding sequence is that the minister, whatever, forgets her name, not Seymour's.
Yeah,
he forgets hers, and it's just this idea. I think if you end with Minnie just laughing, at the fucking just the all. I mean, this release of all this bullshit has happened, and it's still happening on my fucking wedding day.
Yeah.
I'm a X number of years old woman who, by societal standards, is too old
Spinster.
to be right. Yeah. And I'm still having to endure these slings and arrows because of some fucking mook that we paid. It's just a matter of like, what the fuck's going on? Like,
but again, another instance of a man failing her, I think, right? No,
absolutely.
I think that ending would have been, in a way, sort of lighter and more genuine. I mean, I feel like Cassavetes is trying to tell us like, it's okay. It ended up okay. And it's like, I don't know that I need that bow wrapped on it.
Yeah, so I mean, the end sequence of them at outside of a home and they're playing with kids and it looks to be some sort of picnic or
like birthday party kind of idea. I mean, like the mothers are there. Seymour's mustache has grown back, so we understand like time has passed. I mean, I think that is meant to show us that yes, everything worked out and he got that job at the parking garage.
Yeah, I think it undercuts though. I think like especially coming off of Husbands before you get into Women Under the Influence, like all of his films kept this kind of realism of like and this kind of ambiguity of like what's he going to do without us kind of like story.
What are we going to do without him?
And so the idea that there's a happy and maybe maybe there's a read of this that didn't actually happen. That this is a
dream
stamped on Hollywood ending that you wanted, but it's not real. Because the music changes a little bit.
Yeah.
And like
it's a little more surreal, a little more
right.
Dreamy
And they're behaving in ways that they've never behaved like before either. And you're also out of a city setting. I don't know. I mean, I guess if you want to play it that way, I guess it's. But I do think that had it ended at the wedding sequence of just a shot of Minnie laughing. I think. And Seymour laughing as well, but not really understanding the true depth of her her emotion at the moment.
Her understanding of the absurdity of the situation.
Right. And also that could have been just too fucking heavy, and everyone would have just walked out and jumped off a cliff.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if Cassavetes like, oh, that's too. Let me add this on real fast and do that.
And I also made he was notoriously filmed in sequence, but I doubt that he made Cassell like grow his mustache out again.
Probably not.
Because I think he'd been growing his hair and his mustache since Faces, so like he'd been.
This mustache is huge. It is huge.
It's funny. He had a few DPs on this film, like I think 3 specifically, but the last one that he had, because he was like, and I may be confusing this with a Woman Under the Influence, but the last one he had was a guy who was just driving down the street who had recognized Cassell from Face. He was a film student, right?
Oh, okay.
But he was driving down the street, recognized Cassell, and like stopped him. And was like, hey man, I loved you in Faces. It's like, and then started talking to him about Cassavetes. Like, man, I'd really like to get into one of those Cassavetes films. How do you do that? And it's like, oh, well, here's his number. Call him.
Which sounds about right. I mean, sounds about right.
And he calls him, and then him and Cassavetes have like an hour and a half long conversation the next day. And he's like,
come on in. Right. I like the earlier we were talking about budgets and how people got paid, and I liked how Cassavetes said we never had a contract with anybody. Right. We made money. You made money. Right. And everyone knew that, everyone agreed to it, and nobody was ever sort of let down. And I was like, no, it's
How do you feel about him? He wasn't necessarily anti-union, but he definitely worked outside the union system.
Yeah. I mean, I am a believer in the union, but at the same time, I mean, how do you do that though in the situation he's in?
Right.
I mean, because you're already working outside of the system, could those guys as union members even do that without getting into trouble?
No.
Okay, so I mean, if he's not going to work in that studio system, then he's not necessarily beholden to that same. And this is not to excuse not.
Right.
But I mean, I think there is that kind of thing, of him saying, "Look, this is how I have to do this, so this is who I'm hiring." And if you can't do that, if you can't work for me, because you're part of this system, because you're part of the studio system. I don't know. I don't know.
And that's the reason, and I believe part of the reason that, the Oscar nominations that he did get and the wins that he didn't get, and Gina as well, were because the Academy was reluctant to award non-union productions. And so the fact that it got a Best Actress and a Best Director, this didn't, but a
woman did. Yeah. But I guess it's hard for me to think of Cassavetes as a union busting kind of, picket line crossing person. I wouldn't see him as that way.
No. And there were no strikes going on. I mean, that wasn't, but he just, like I said, I think it would have prevented, to work in that system would have prevented him from being able to do what he did.
Yeah. I've worked with Teamsters. not officially having been a Teamster, and because of the way, not to be like, I'm so awesome, but because of the way that I treated those guys and spoke to them, right, and worked with them, I was able to get away with a lot more in a kind of like management position than maybe others were. And so maybe there's some of that too.
You're kind of like Pryor and Blue Collar.
Yes. Yeah, hitting people with wrenches.
Right, just like that.
Big old wrenches, just like that. Ready?
Yeah.
To move on, let's talk about A Woman Under the Influence.
This is Mabel. Come on out here, honey. You know everybody? This is Mabel for everybody. All right. Mabel! Mabel's not crazy. She's unusual.
Tell me what you want me to be, how you want me to be. I can be that. I can be anything. You tell me, Nick.
Mabel's a delicate, sensitive woman. And the reason I'm worried is that you've been acting a little strange. I wonder if you've been aware of that or not.
This is what I call a really handsome face.
That's enough.
Okay, come on, let's dance.
No.
Look at this muscle. I
That's
never
enough.
saw such muscles. I bet he didn't fit in his suit.
Mabel,
Come on.
you had your fun, it's enough.
Vito Grimaldi.
Get your ass down!
And like your friends.
I know it. I know that.
I'm not one of those stiffs that you like with their noses up in the air. And boom, boom, with their noses up in the air. How awfully nice.
Billy's looking at you this way.
This summary is a little longer because it's a little harder, I think, too. Anyway, the Longhettis are an Italian-American working-class family. Nick, played by Peter Falk, is a construction worker. His wife, Mabel, is a stay-at-home mother and wife. They have 3 kids. Mabel is unusual, perhaps mentally ill, maybe with bipolar or borderline disorder, but diagnosis is not really the point here. She is warm, spontaneous, beautiful, and an affectionate, if inconsistent, mother. Because of Mabel's eccentricities, the Longhetti family seems to function at a kind of delicate equilibrium. I smashed those 2 words together there. Delicately. This stability is disrupted when Nick fails to get away from work on a night he and Mabel had planned to spend alone together. The children are with her mother, and Mabel feels desperate and lonely, so she gets drunk, goes out, and picks up a stranger at a bar. The next morning, Nick brings his crew home after an emergency night shift. Mabel copes by cooking up a spectacular spaghetti breakfast and acting erratic around Nick's men. Later, when a neighbor brings his children to play, Mabel again behaves in a way someone else finds quote-unquote inappropriate. Nick, under pressure from his mother and Mabel's physician, is persuaded to have his wife institutionalized. She is taken away. Nick angrily rejects the concern of his friends, but struggles to manage the children. The film ends with the evening of Mabel's return from hospital. Nick and his mother have arranged a dinner party to celebrate her recovery. Nick invites everyone he knows to welcome her home, but soon realizes that's a bad idea and sends them all away. It becomes clear that despite electroconvulsive therapy, Mabel is unchanged. It also becomes more evident than ever that her quote-unquote madness is rooted as much in the family's social network, her uncomprehending parents, judgmental mother-in-law, and volatile husband, as it is in her own brain or personality. After Nick explodes and Mabel attempts self-harm, a moment of calm descends. Mabel and Nick put the children to bed and then go about cleaning up the house as usual, their fragile normality restored for now. So again, another instance of a man failing Gina Rowlands.
Yeah, this is a 4-hour watch of this would have been, but you would have had to broken it up into 2-parters. I don't know.
Well, here, I find this film to be funny and empathetic in its portrayal of this subject matter, right? Marriage, mental illness, how we fail to help those closest to us, how we hurt those closest to us. I think it also exposes, to an extent, the kind of social structures that don't help mental illness, right? Or don't aid in mental health. I think this film also shows how a character like Fawkes lacks the language to understand and communicate with his wife. She also, in turn, doesn't know how to communicate with him either because of how she sees everything. And I think this really lays it bare. I mean, there's a moment, and it's really heartbreaking, where they're trying to, have her committed, and she's like, to death do us part, you and me, right? Trying to sort of get that across, and she just can't.
Right. She goes into a speech about she tries to give 5 reasons why, she's essentially sane and she's fine and she shouldn't be committed. And she's standing there and she can't really communicate any of them, right? I mean, it's so she goes into these little mannerisms of almost baseball talk where she's like, and like these little zips in her voice and these little hand gestures.
She points and she like puts a thumb over her shoulder. And it's almost like she's shooting a gun at the corner.
Yeah, the performance by her is amazing. And it's one of those ones reading about this, Scorsese was like heartbroken that burst in. I mean, like he was heartbroken that he directed the film that kept Rowlands from winning Best Actress in this. This idea of that life is not what we expected it to be in this violent. 2 different types of outbreaks, right? Where Falk goes to violence and Gina Rowlands doesn't know how to handle that and goes inward. And has really no one is on Gina Rowlands' side, and no one's on Mabel's side in this movie. No, she's left completely alone. And I think that this speaks to not only how we handle mental illness, but this idea of women specifically at this time who were expected to be homekeepers and mothers and stay at home, basically servants to a marriage that didn't give them anything other than that was expected to take everything from them and give nothing back, and for them to be these smiling Stepford wives that are always at the ready with a dinner, with a 7 a.m. spaghetti dinner, right? And to be able to be at the whims of their husbands who are, because they're working, allowed to do whatever they want to do, essentially. Yeah. And she tries to find that normalcy again when she goes out and her husband's not there. And then basically that's, you're given that's seemingly the mental break that happens at that point, right? I mean,
I think this had been going on.
I'm sure it has been, right? I mean, because we keep talking about how Nick is very protective and saying how she's not crazy, and I just stop talking, because everyone kind of dances around like Mabel's a very sensitive woman and Mabel's all this and that. And Nick's like, she's not crazy. I don't know, stop talking about her like she's crazy.
She's unique.
Right. This couldn't have been an easy film to watch in the theaters for anybody who was watching.
But people did.
Yeah, it did well. Yeah.
I think, something else that, and this goes to what you were speaking about, but a couple of things. I think on one hand, this film seems very much about this relationship that isn't normal. right? But is trying to be normal, or is trying to be normalized, right? By, or bending to the will of sort of outside pressure, right? So RE, conventional society. And so I know that this goes against like Cassavetes' own interpretation of the film, but whatever. Maybe Mabel is sort of quote unquote mad because she doesn't fit in the way everyone thinks that she should fit. I mean, she does these things when she has the party for the kids, and the neighbor comes over and he's like, "Why are you playing Swan Lake? Why are we dancing? I find this inappropriate." She's like, "What are you talking about?" Again, and
she tries to get him to engage, right? She tries to get him to dance.
Right. And she's like, "Why are you so boring?" Right? But it's the outside world looking at her and judging and saying, no, like, you're the weird one. And this goes then into Cassavetes in an interview said, and this is a quote, "All women are crazy. They've been driven crazy playing a role they can't fulfill." Meaning, right, that's the end of the quote, meaning we tell them to be 17 different things, and how can you do that? Right? How can you? We continue to tell women how they ought to look, act, work, exist. And then when they try to, we tell them you're doing it wrong. Right? So, I mean, what do we expect? Right? And look, I'm not saying all women are crazy. I'm taking Cassavetes' quote and going, I see where this film comes from because of that. She's trying to do this stuff. And she's like, this is not who I am. And that's driving me mad.
Yeah, and she's left alone at every single turn. Like, again, at no point does anyone ever like her. So you get the feeling that maybe her mom has also had mental issues as well, and to the extent where Nick indulges those, but indulges them in all the wrong ways. Mm-hmm. Indulges all of and seemingly encourages the idiosyncrasies, but never really trying to provide any sort of like real balance to it all, because he doesn't know how to navigate any of this as well.
He encourages them up to a point until he's embarrassed by them,
right?
And then he snaps, right. And there's even this moment that comes way too late in him trying to navigate that and save that relationship, where when she comes home from the hospital and everyone except family has left, and she is sort of not being herself, and he pulls her aside and he's like, just be you, just be yourself, fuck them all. And it's like, now you want her to, and he's trying to do that. He's like, give me a better ba ba ba, right? Because she's making these noises. He's like, a better one. And she's been told to be two different things at the same time.
She spent 6 months in a mental institution being electrocuted and medicated.
Right. But I think it's so telling. I think it's so good on Cassavetes' part to go, it's not her. It's everyone around her. Because even the family, when they sit down for dinner, she's like, I would like you all to go now. I'd like to be alone with my husband. And they're like, no, that's not what you want. Right. But he's so good at saying this family is the stand-in for every other family and for in the outside world, telling everyone else what they actually want, and then telling them why they're crazy because of it.
Yeah. Well, and at the scene, she at the scene after everyone leaves, and it's just the family, and they're all kind of like looking at her. She crawls into her dad's lap, and she's like, "Will you please stand up for me? Will you please stand up for me?" And he fucking literally stands up.
Well, and because she's trying to get them to go, right? And so he does, and he's like. Wait, so what? One of them, maybe it's her mother who's like, you know what she wants us to do. You know what she's getting at. And it's this moment where the mother seems to be saying, let's go. Mm-hmm. And everyone else is like, no. Right? But yeah, I mean, she crawls into her dad's lap, and it's a heartbreaking kind of moment. It's just, I mean...
And her dad earlier in the evening was like, I'm not eating spaghetti. I'm not. I can't eat it. I'm not that kind of guy. It was like, what the?
But that goes back to your like, how much spaghetti did they go through? Right. Which seems like a little Easter egg or inside baseball there. No more.
There's a lot to. I mean, like the scenes that you have where you're just focusing on Nick, and you clearly like he's so quick to anger and embarrassed by the entire situation, and really only ever concerns himself with Mabel when it concerns him. You know, when things fall back onto him. Yeah. Like once, you know, Mabel goes off and sends the kids, and this is what's really like I think telling about the entire setup is we see Mabel trying to get ready for a date with her husband, and she's with it. I mean, like she's loading up her mom, and she's worried about her mom being able to handle the situation, but she's got 3 kids, and she's got every single book that they need, and a bicycle, and like all these things that they need. And she's like, shit, I don't necessarily know if I trust anybody else to take care of my kids. Right. But Nick's asked me to do this kind of thing. So I'm going to send them off. And then Nick, of course, has to work late and can't get home and doesn't call because he's embarrassed or he doesn't really want to. But he says that he doesn't know how to tell her that. But I mean, in reality, it's more just.
How do I let her? I don't want to let her down. I don't want to.
Right, but more to the point, he probably doesn't want to deal with it, right? And more to the point, he doesn't want to deal with the reaction. He certainly doesn't want to get chastised by his wife.
Yeah.
And then the sequence where she goes off and she picks up a man, and she's immediately like, not really picking up a man. She's just in a bar drinking and talking about her life. Like Nick didn't come home. Can you believe Nick didn't? And like she's talking to this guy like she knows who he is, and he takes advantage of the situation. By saying, you want to go someplace quieter, you want to go to your place kind of thing. And then are we to imply that they had sex together, or is he just like she passed out and he stayed there?
Night? I don't know, because she fights him off at one point. Right. She's like, hey, buddy. Right. And so I don't know. Because I wasn't sure either, because I mean, I think there is a reading where you're like, okay, they did sleep together, but also another reading where, she successfully sort of did fight him off, and she just, he sacked out wherever. Right. But regardless, he gets up because he likes to walk around and talk to himself in the morning.
Right. Another man doesn't give a shit about what.
Right. But this is also the other thing. Like everybody, if Mabel's crazy, everybody in this movie is crazy. Right. This guy's crazy. Falk is just as crazy and unbalanced with his quickness to anger and quickness to violence. Right.
So, I mean, like it's...
He's so good in this, and I think too something else about him in this role and Cassavetes' approach to it. There is a male platonic love in this film. There's a camaraderie. There is a vulnerability between all these guys. When these guys when his workers, he seems to be like the foreman of this crew, right? When they ask about Mabel, they're concerned. They're serious. They aren't teasing him until he like gets pissed at them, and then they sort of like, oh, don't talk about Mabel. But when they do it in a way. It's like, Nick, do you need anything? Right? Can we help? How is everything? And he just, shrugs them or like blasts them and yells at them. But again, this inability of a type of man, of a type of masculinity that's unable to accept help and be open with that.
How do you feel about the racism in this movie? At one point, he calls one of his workers, talking about how he couldn't understand, like one of his workers couldn't understand her behavior. And do you think that M word could understand? And
I don't know that I caught that.
There are a couple of moments that. And he goes back to Mikey and Nikki. The same thing of kind of like this weird, and it could just be of the time. Not that I'm excusing it. It's just these one-off terms that didn't mean anything to these men at the time.
Right. And I think that's very much what it is. I also think that it's probably something that character would say.
Sure.
Without thinking twice.
Right.
Where it's and again, this is not excusing it. This is calling attention to the misuse or the abuse, right, of language and people. But it would have been in the everyday parlance for these guys. It would have been something that they said back and forth. And, I think there's probably a fair amount of bias, disdain, racism between, because this film has Italians, African Americans, Hispanics. I mean, all of them work together.
Right.
And I imagine there is still some tension within those groups, even though as we see them working, there's not.
Right.
It doesn't seem to be so much tension. There seems to be, care and concern. Yeah. So, I mean, not to just like brush it away, but no, right. But I do think that it's hard to it's hard to judge that from 2023 looking at 1974 and not saying, and I'm not just throwing my hands up saying different times, but to realize how language has changed and how we just talked about the use of trauma language in Bottoms as not surprising as kind of everyday terminology. And it's unfair then to not look back and go, okay, that was everyday terminology. That's bad. Right. So yes, he shouldn't have said it, but I mean, I'm not going to cancel Cassavetes or Falk or the film because of that. I know.
and it's kind of surprising that there's not more of it, to be fair, because Cassavetes seemed to like to kind of dabble, like and kind of do. I mean, like you know what I'm saying, like he liked to provoke. So it seemed Seymour, provokes a black member of the bar, attender of the bar when he's in Minnie and Moskowitz. So I mean, it's not like it's. I don't necessarily see race as a huge issue for Cassavetes. Like, I mean, but again, you can go back to Shadows too. There's it's not a huge theme in his role, but I mean, in his movies, but I mean, it is there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's aware of it, and I think he knows. I think do we give Cassavetes enough credit for being progressive?
I mean, from a woman's perspective, I don't know.
Yeah,
I really don't.
I'm not a woman.
No, I mean, I'm saying, but I mean, like from a telling female stories perspective, like I think listening to some of the things Rowan said about this movie in particular is that she had asked John to write something for her, and she was kind of taken aback by, and she was like, I don't believe that men can't write women and women can't write men. That's not what I'm saying, but this in particular of this loneliness and this kind of insanity that we put on women, especially in this time, you weren't seeing that. You weren't seeing that anywhere really in any movies at all. But let alone coming from a white male director that was writing the story specifically for and based around a 40-year-old woman who is in the middle of a troubled marriage with an abusive man and trying to figure out her shit.
And look at what he did with Faces too, and how he, how he showed us that women, we're quick to discount what women need or what they want, right? The Layla, I can't remember her last name now. I mean, she just passed away, but from Shadows was also complimentary about how Cassavetes wrote women. Right. And so I think, this is something but also the way he dealt with race in Shadows. The way he looked at children with IDD in A Child Is Waiting and how his vision, whether or not that would have ended up on screen, was contrary to the producers. That is a much more progressive thought than I think we give him credit for. Sure. There. So I think kind of across the board, again, still not excusing the use of the N-word in the film, but I think across the board.
Well, he didn't actually call him an N. He called him monkey, basically.
Oh, okay. Right. Anyway, okay. God, sorry.
Well, I just wanted to be clear. What I was trying to dance around was not the N-word, right? And I don't know why I was
dance.
Anyway, it's not a huge point. It's just I think it's an interesting call out to see. Yeah. Because I do think that that Cassavetes was careful in his words, and I do think that of course that this is how men would have talked to one another, but you don't see it so prevalent. I guess maybe in the moment that he was angry, it just seems kind of, and I think it's telling for Falk's character that in the moment that he's angry and berating his wife, he's also berating the men that he, still trusts, but still sees as beneath him to a certain extent. Right.
I think we also lose a lot of ourselves in that kind of emotion, in that kind of anger, right? Where we really lose track of what we're saying and who we're saying it to. Again, not to excuse it, but I think that does play in that character.
And he's constantly angry. I mean, this is an interesting kind of look at this of like how all of this affects Falk. Mm-hmm. And I mean, not so much how Falk affects how Mabel, but how Nick is affected and how he reacts to all of this. Because a lot of ways you can look at Mabel being childlike in the sense of how she's trying to communicate with the world around her, and she kind of goes into herself and talks a lot in her head and talks a lot in mumbles and tries to put words together where she clearly doesn't feel like she has the words, and she kind of becomes, she's very childlike when she's standing up there and she's all alone. Nick's the same way in an alpha male sort of way, where he behaves almost identically. He has much more violent tendencies and allowed to have violent tendencies. his violent tendencies are encouraged where Mabel's aren't. You know, and this movie is so heartbreaking. And I read about people when they came out of this movie, they were like, you know, they threw up, and you know, it was just like, and they'd be so shocked, and they'd go right back in and see it again, and just like, it's crazy to me that this had kind of the grassroots kind of success that it did.
Yeah, because the critics hated it.
Right, it's crazy. That's crazy too, right?
I want to look, man. This is an example of Pauline Kael hating John Cassavetes for reasons, hating a film just because it was made by Cassavetes. She's not the only one.
Right, no.
I am going to take these dead people to task.
You hear that, Kael estate? We're coming for you.
But there's a moment where, you know, Kael. Let me find it now. Oh, I can cut my mumbling out when I go, right. So I mean, Kael hated this film, and she made sure to mention, like in her review, that the film was this like didactic illustration of Artie Lange's version of insanity. And I just want to say a little bit about this because I'm not an expert enough on Lange to really kind of like get into it, but one of Lange's ideas was that mental illness was in large part affected by society, and in particular in the family. And I think that we've seen this play out. I think that we have a better understanding now of mental illness and how it's not just some made-up thing in our heads alone. And so he had other ideas too, but mostly he was like anti-psychiatry, anti-electroshock. But yeah, if we look at mental health in this movie and how the outside world and the family affect Mabel, especially in how like her character is like slipping into strange gestures and strange use of language to try and communicate a problem or like distress, I just don't know what Kael's issue is. And if you've read her review, it's just a hit piece.
Right.
It is just a hit piece on Cassavetes because everything she sets up about Lange, she then basically throws away by saying Cassavetes wasn't like or failed in doing that. It's ridiculous. And she starts to claim that I'm really upset by this review, to be honest. She talks about how the people in this film aren't real, rather they're barely human. And I think the complete opposite of that. I mean, she thinks people like this don't exist.
Does she know humans?
That's what, right. Well, that's what I mean, right? So first of all, it's a movie. Second, it's a movie. But I think Cassavetes is showing us this version of a marriage, of mental health, right? It's not necessarily verisimilitude. It is a version of something. It's hyper reality. Kael never knew someone with bipolar disorder either.
Well, I would argue that what is she, I mean, look, I think Kael had a vendetta against Cassavetes, and she even goes on to say, I think it was her that was saying that Rollins did nothing because she was doing too much,
right, and that she was exhausting.
And I was just like, "Fuck you!"
Right.
I mean, like, again, that's you should have the wherewithal, because again, who's asking you to review this movie? Just step the fuck away.
Just don't.
Right? You don't need to say anything at this point because we all know you hate Cassavetes.
Right.
So if you hate Cassavetes, like, just your review just needs to be, fuck, I hate Cassavetes. I'm not going to watch any of the things. Why would you watch any of the things that he did?
Right.
But this idea of that these aren't real humans, I think that one, that's just laughable. Because, and again, look, these are characters. Of course they are. But I'm sorry, who is she pointing to in cinema that's a real fucking character?
I know.
Right? I mean, especially before, like, who is she pointing to?
I know.
And I know that she didn't like his films, but I mean, like, and I know that Cassavetes' use of untrained actors did lend itself to have that kind of sort of realism, like this kind of docudrama kind of like that you're watching it on a group of people. But yeah, I agree with you. I mean, like, I think this idea of like mental health, I think this idea of like Nick being bullied into and like giving up on, and like everyone giving up on Mabel and institutionalizing her. And look, this is all a very complicated subject, which is, I'm not going to sit here and say that if you institutionalize somebody, you're giving, but in the context of this film, Nick, his mother, and I mean, and the opportune doctor, they're giving up on Mabel, and they're putting, they're not even, I guess not giving up, but they're putting her aside so they don't have to deal with her.
Falk says that his character betrays her.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And because she does nothing wrong. I mean, like, you know, Nick's mom is like, well, she brought a man over to the home, which is, she's talking about the man with the kids.
Yeah.
She's not talking about the man from the night before, because there's no way she could have known about
She was
that.
having a party, right?
Right.
For the kids.
Right.
It was a neighbor.
And yeah, she wanted neighbor kids to play together. And yeah, her kids... And the guy comes in and the room has stuff around it, and it's just but like it's not destroyed.
Kids are all running around being kids,
right? And one of them is naked, but that's Mabel. That's Mabel's kid, and
right,
and it's Mabel's house. So I mean, yeah, let Mabel's kid be naked. It's not like it's.
I know.
This idea that I mean, I think this whole movie, just this idea of like expectations that we have for one another. And the minute that we don't as a society teach people how to deal with, one, we put on these ideas of what expectations should be, right? Mm-hmm. This house that we live in and these kids that we have and this life that we live in. If we do X, Y, and Z, then the result will be 1, 2, and 3. And of course, it doesn't ever really work out that way. We don't equip ourselves with how to deal with that type of disappointment. So that disappointment either functions in a way that it manifests in Nick as anger, and it manifests in Mabel. And again, not to say that that mental health is a manifestation of disappointment. That's not what I'm trying to say here. But these things are exacerbated. Had Mabel been supported, had Mabel been in a loving relationship, and when this goes to the end, and like they're making the bed together, and they're moving the table because they sleep on this pull-out couch of this inherited home that they have, and it's this, we've gotten it's so like heartwarming and disheartening at the same time. Where like, okay, now we can all breathe because now we're not in a situation that we've got a ton of outside expectations on us about how to all behave. Mm-hmm. And, it's funny because, had everyone been at the house, had all of Nick's friends been at the house, the situation probably would have played out a lot better. Yeah. The camaraderie, the drinking, the would have played to Mabel's strengths, and people would have just been happy to be around her. Right. But instead, now there's an expectation for her to behave and to perform again. And now she's left again standing alone. It is interesting to see where this film takes itself and where it doesn't allow itself to go. Because yes, she does try to commit self-harm, but we don't really get. I mean, it's pretty benign in that sense there too, where it's not really. You don't really get a sense that it was ever really fully intentioned, right? I mean, and her kids are kind of there too, and it seems like. Yeah, one would think that
Kale had a problem with the kids at the end too,
right? Yeah, I mean, fuck her. She sucks.
I'm sorry.
No. I mean,
I do find like the critical response, the response from critics to just be boggling in how they talked about it. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, and I mean, to that end, I think, again, anytime that you're talking about something and you're not, I mean, like in Cassavetes was very letting people be open to their own interpretations of his films. I mean, he wanted to provoke, he wanted to present the story, but he was never judgmental of any of his characters. Like even the guys in Husbands, they're never chastised for being these pieces of shit that they are. In fact, but he's also not really like lifting them up or praising them. So like this idea of like this kind of ambiguity that well, I'm going to be presented with this and where you fall and this story says way more about you than it does the storyteller. And that's what you should be thinking about as you come out of this. Like, and if you're not feeling sorry for Mabel, and if you don't empathize and sympathize with her and her situation where she really has no one, everyone else in the story wants to put her aside, and everyone else is joined in that together. They have support in that. Nick has his mom to be there when they institutionalize her. And the fact that the institutionalization doesn't do anything for her, like that whole 6 months that she spent away from, and that the entirety of the family then believes that she should just be able to walk back in and pick up like she'd never gone.
And they don't want to hear anything about it either. Stop that silly talk. We don't want to hear about your stay at the institution.
You should be thankful that we threw you a party and welcome home. But like, why are you being...
She just wants to go to bed.
Right. It's fucked up, man. And it's this, this is not a... steel yourself if you sit down to watch a Woman Under the Influence. It's a good 2.5 hours.
It's 2.5 hours. It's rough. I think it's rewarding, though. I think it is. Yeah.
I think Roland's performance in this is transcendent. I mean, it really the things that she can do, the body mannerisms that she does in this film, just the way that she is. I think Falk is great as well, but I think Roland's
she's the star
is just amazing in this, and it's kind of funny that this doesn't get talked about when we talk about mental health films much, really.
Right.
It doesn't when we talk about things that get brought up about.
Well, we like Girl Interrupted. We like.
No, we don't.
No. We don't, but we like films like that. I mean, look,
right, that are easy stories, right? That have happy endings.
That's
and
the thing.
Right.
This is tough.
Right.
This puts this in your face. And I mean, look, I don't know about you, but I've been around, several people during a manic break. It's not dissimilar, to what we just saw on screen.
Well, this is actually pretty light, to be honest. I mean, this is kind of kid gloves in a lot of ways, and so however you want to, do your diagnosis of Mabel. Yeah, this is on the lighter end of the spectrum of how real life shit works. Right.
I mean, so this confronts you with that, where everything else, is very much a kind of glossy, glamorized version of it. And so, it should be talked about more, but man, it is.
Well, and even something like Cuckoo's Nest, in the sense of that has we end with the lobotomy and but that seems more. But again, you could argue that Nicholson doesn't actually have a mental disease in that movie; that he's just playing the system, and getting taken advantage of by a bureaucracy that sees that.
In that book and that film was much more of an allegory about the outside world, not really a looking in at mental illness and how social structures can affect mental illness. I mean, I think it's very much this is how the system keeps the individual down, right? Who's a free-thinking, Keynesian type anyway.
Right. Yeah, and in this, like you said, the films that we like are the ones that have happy endings.
Yeah.
The ones we can draw to where we've cured mental illness or we've gotten back to some sense of normalcy, right? And in most times, that doesn't fucking play out that way.
Yeah. And we know that this normalcy is tenuous at best. That give it, tomorrow morning, something else is going to, and we sort of know what's going to keep happening.
Which kind of is, like I said, when we look at Moskowitz and this, the two endings of these, it seems interesting that he chose to go on the happy upbeat with Minnie and Moskowitz. Yeah. And I guess you could, I think that the ending of this, of A Woman Under the Influence, is intended to be uplifting in a sense, or at least a sense of relief, right? Okay, we've gotten past...
We can breathe.
Right, we can breathe for a second because they're finally alone and the kids are in bed and they're going back to some level of normalcy, but that this is a temporary situation. But at least for the film, for the 2.5 hours, we can go, okay, and exhale, and as we walk out, into the street, right?
Yeah. I just wanted to, for people out there that might be listening, Stanley Kaufman wrote a terrible review about this film as well. And I don't want to harp too much on this. I think when I was typing up these notes, I was really angry about a couple of reviews. But this is Kaufman's quote. To me, this film is utterly without interest or merit. And I just find, look, I talk about we bring our own stuff to art all the time. But if you're so predisposed to find something uninteresting and without merit, like you said, just don't watch it. Right? Just don't watch it.
Or don't write about it.
Right. You don't have to review it. So John Updike, the novelist.
Not personally, but
yes. Well, right. You went at those suburban swingers parties. Anyway, he had rules for when he wrote book reviews, right? When he would engage in criticism. And one of the rules was never write about something I'm predisposed to dislike. And I think that goes here. You don't have to like it. That's fine. But to just do a hatchet job on something, I find very disingenuous.
Yeah. That idea that it's unengaged. What was the words again?
Utterly without interest or merit.
Okay. See, and so what, then it would make me go and ask, okay, so what has merit to you?
Yeah.
Because the idea that you can find, look, I know we shit on a lot of things in here, but like
this is true.
But I mean, I don't think we're doing it unfairly necessarily. I mean, again, and we're always doing it with a your mileage may vary kind of attitude to it. But I don't know, like not being able to see any sort of goodness, and then you don't like Cassavetes films, and you also don't like films about real people.
Right.
You want like, I keep going back, but you want Douglas Sirk. You want this idea of like this pretty painted pastels and that's what you want. Okay, fine. But this idea that no one would is bullshit.
Right. Ebert loved it.
Yeah.
Ebert loved Minnie and Moskowitz too.
He did. He didn't care for
Faces.
Husbands,
He did not like Husbands, which makes me think that there was something in Husbands that he didn't have. I'm kidding. I'm sure he had friends. I'm just like. All right, anything else you want to say about A Woman Under the Influence?
No. I'd go watch it. Brace yourself.
Yeah. But you should watch it. It's brilliant. It's tough, but yeah.
Look, it's not by far, but it is. If you want to dip your toe into Cassavetes and you want to say I've seen a Cassavetes film, Woman Under the Influence is the one you should see.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's give some people some ideas if they like these films. What else might they like?
I fucking abhor my recommended for you this week. So
that's all right.
But you go with.
Want me to start?
Yeah, you
okay.
start.
So. My first recommended, if you like bottoms, you might like Daisies, 1966 by Vera Chidilova. This is about two young women who realize that the world is a shitty place, and so they decide to become tricksters of a sort. Right? They date older men, they take their money, they just get into a bunch of mischief. It's a lot of fun.
It's a good movie.
Yeah.
I went more standard fare, but I'm going to say 10 Things I Hate About You.
Okay, nice.
It's not a great. I mean, it's not a great comparison, but it has that same sort of like.
Yeah, mine is not a high school film.
Right. Mine definitely is. But it's a send up of those of the tropes. It plays well with the Shakespearean structure, and kind of focuses on a different aspect of clearly it's a Shakespearean play in this point, so it's a Taming of the Shrew, but it does play well with that the high school conceit and is a little bit smarter than your typical high school film.
Yeah. All right. Cool. If you liked Minnie and Moskowitz, you might like She's the One, Ed Burns' 1996 film, starring Jennifer Aniston, and Cameron Diaz. But Cameron Diaz was the one who the critics were really like, oh, she's great. She's the one, if you know it. But she wasn't the one in the movie. But yeah, I liked No Looking Back, but those three Burns films are the only ones that I really like.
I don't know if No Looking Back was the John Bon Jovi one.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure if I've seen that one
and
forever.
Lauren Holly.
Right. I was pretty excited after Brothers Drink Mullet.
Yeah.
I thought this guy was going to be the guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it has all those like white male sensibilities, but like I just really loved. And I love Connie Britton. And so
absolutely,
I just thought that was such a good like independent fun film. Like it's obviously not fun.
It's like the working class Long Island Woody Allen.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. It's very 96 Woody Allen for sure.
Mm-hmm.
My recommended if you like in this one is Frankie and Johnny with Michelle Pfeiffer and Al Pacino.
Not at the Claire de Lune.
yes, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, nice. You were saying earlier that Pacino stole Falk's career, and
absolutely. I think Falk does angry, yelling acting so much better,
much more gravitas.
Right. Yeah. It just seems real. Where like Pacino seems like an affectation, right?
Yeah. Capital A. Yeah.
One glass eye and they're basically the same height, and they're it's just a matter of like why. I think as much as Columbo allowed Falk to do what the things that he wanted to do, but I do think that held him back a little bit in the sense of the roles that he got. Mm-hmm. And I do think Falk is a better comedic actor than Pacino is, obviously. And I don't think Falk would. If he were alive,
Insomnia was pretty funny.
but only for Robin Williams. It was just him riffing. It was only I don't think Falk would have traded his career. I mean, necessarily, just because reading some of the stories behind these movies. I would have loved to have been in Cassavetes' circle.
Oh my God!
Just to be in that creative, to be received by him warmly. I bet is just fucking amazing.
Yeah,
just to be able to sit down and read one of his scripts, or to be, it had to have been and then to rub elbows with fucking Altman and Scorsese and Elaine May and have those people around you all the time, essentially.
Yeah.
To say that you were basically, that Scorsese looked up to you, that it's just.
Neither of them were that tall. Sorry. No, but yeah. No, I can't imagine the conversations and just also the antics.
Right.
I
just this, I would imagine being on the set of A Woman Under the Influence. And I mean, it's harrowing as the material was, knowing that you're going to spend 12 to 16 hours a day with these folks, just putting in and making art.
Yeah.
And making something that matters, just had to have been just why you were there, right?
Yeah. The reason to get up in the morning.
All right. Sure. Recommend it if you like it.
All right. If you liked A Woman Under the Influence, you might like Through a Glass Darkly, Ingmar Bergman's 1961 film where, while on holiday with her emotionally distant family, Karen, who has a history of mental illness, starts to slip from reality and think she is being visited by God. It's another uplifting, easy watch about mental illness.
Yeah, and mine will be as well. Mine is Lars von Trier's Breaking the Waves.
Yeah.
About a man who makes his wife do things for him, to put it mildly.
If you like those 3 films, you might like these 6 films. Look, we all need a good cry every once in a while.
I'm looking forward to next time.
So tell folks next time what we're going to get into.
So next time, by this time that we record next time, we'll have had our Fort Worth Film Club September screening. We're screening Real Women Have Curves. So we'll talk about that film, and then we'll talk about the next 2 Cassavetes films as well, which is The Killing of a Chinese Bookie and Opening Night. And I'm looking forward. I love both of those, so I'm looking forward to talking about those in kind of a different sense of this is a little less harrowing and a little bit more just kind of plot driven, films that kind of get away from this fucking gut punch of a cinematic experience.
Man.
I would have loved to have watched A Woman Under the Influence with the crowd. And someday, I would hope there's some Cassavetes that comes through. Because with a group of people who appreciate the film, I think it would serve itself. See all of that on a big screen.
Oh yeah, and communal mourning.
Right. Yeah, and to kind of get that exactly, that kind of visceral. Reaction from everybody in the crowd kind of thing. And this kind of...
That'd be fun. Let's make that happen. Let's manifest it into happening, into real life. As Aaron Rodgers recently said, I believe in manifestation. I believe. Okay. Anything else about the films?
Nah, that's all
time?
I got.
All right. Until next time, thank you for listening.
And keep screaming.
Watch on. Will you tell me the time? I'll go get the little chains on your shoes. Big deal? Jeez Louise. But do you have the time, please? Because I'm waiting. Hey, listen, you birds. I'm waiting for my kids at school. Do you mind giving me the time? Do ya? What's the matter with you? What's the... Do you have your tongue? Big...
You have been listening to Why Does the Wilhelm Scream with your hosts, Brock and Jason.
If you like today's episode, do us a favor and rate, review, and subscribe in whatever application you use to consume podcasts these days. You can reach us by visiting whydoesthewilhelmscream.com. If you are in the DFW area, we would love to see you at a Fort Worth Film Club event. You can learn more about those and find a full schedule at fortworthfilmclub.com. And you can learn about my foundation and how we are trying to foster the next generation of film lovers at realhousefoundation.org. That's REEL housefoundation.org. Till next time,